we were talking a lot the last time we did one of these about the idea of the brand. Does the ACC have a brand? And so if we do something like that, I mean, the problem that we're going to run into, or not necessarily a problem, but something we have to approach is that you've got half your schools are basketball first schools. And that kind of hurts the brand.
Well, yeah, but if
meaning if you stay focused on football, do you lose half your crowd in the North Carolina, the Syracuse, the Duke? Because even though they like football, it's not diehard, whereas you got the Clemson,
I don't
NC State.
I understand that, but NC State competes in basketball.
They do, but you have to. My point is, you have to have that piece.
Duke's competed in football. Syracuse has competed on both sides.
Right.
And going back to the ACC media days, the commissioner John Swofford came on, and this was actually something that was brought up. Mm-hmm. The fact that we're a basketball conference, and his response was, we know that we're a basketball conference, and when we brought in those teams like Miami and Virginia Tech, and moreover Syracuse, is to enhance that. But the problem, I don't want to call it a problem, but what he said was, listen, the money and all the big business is in football. That's where it is.
Sure.
All the money and all the big business is in football. And as much as we are a basketball conference, the reason we have the ACC Network, because they asked them, they said, well, why do this? Why do the ACC Network? Especially with the success of Clemson, you're on ABC, you're on ESPN, you're on NBC. You're getting the coverage time for those for our teams. And he said again, it's about the big business is in football, and there's that's those things are controlled by those networks, not by the ACC, right? So there's money to be made there, and as well as recognition for the conference and the other sports and the other athletes at the school, which is all kind of, I love it, but it is an ancillary benefit to how great the football generates awareness. And so, I guess to his point is that it really sounded like, as the commissioner of our conference since '97, that even though, yes, we are a basketball conference, essentially, that he's trying to change that image a bit. He's trying to. I think that's part of the ACC Network. And it's definitely something that could be done when you have in the past 4 years, you've had the national champion in your conference in football.
Right.
It can be done. Teams like you guys just have to start to compete a little bit more. But and then they brought it up. They're like, the reality is, like it's Clemson and then it's everyone else. Okay. But then they looked at the past 4 or 5 years of records of us in Alabama, and it's merely identical. I mean, it is like identical, my friend. And I say that to say because, so maybe we're head and shoulders above everybody else in our conference. The reality is Alabama, statistics and records-wise, is as well.
Yeah.
In the SEC. It may not seem that by looking at it, by the eye test, but in terms of statistics, it's the same exact thing.
Yeah.
That the level of competition in the SEC is going to be higher all around. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, to have similar records like that, don't trash the ACC completely. And as a matter of fact, he went on to say that there was like some study done that they looked at the last 5 years of, of the competition between Clemson and Alabama. And they did some record thing, and they ranked it based on quality opponents at the end of the season, basically those that came out with a winning record, okay?
Sure.
Wins you've had over winning teams at the end of when the season's done. And again, identical. I think we're like something like 38-2, and they're like, 37-2,
Mm-hmm.
So again, at the end of the day, if it's it's quality opponents, I mean,
yeah. Well, the thing about it that I look at is,
and I don't want to get you off of your question, like take you on another tangent.
No. But I think kind of going back to it though is this is the challenge becomes for the ACC. The ACC network is excellent because some of the points you brought up about the network is going to be it's going to be your competitive the competitiveness in multiple sports, which I think the ACC has they actually have the bigger hook. I mean, you look at baseball, you look at softball, you look at soccer, all those kind of things. Hell, even lacrosse. You got like Duke lacrosse, North Carolina lacrosse, Syracuse, Virginia. So I think the great part about it is it's truly going to be a conference type network. So that's going to be a huge advantage for them in the ACC. But what I'm thinking about from a football perspective is the thing about football. Like I'll use as an example, like ESPN. Look at all the college. The spring game is the epicenter of the off-season college football experience. Like everybody centers it around it. You're going to have your media days. Obviously, once the season starts, it's the season.
They televise spring game. Right. If you look unbelievable.
Now, we had like South Carolina on there. We had Georgia. We had Alabama. Now Clemson made it, of course, because everybody wants to see Clemson because they are the premier team right now. And even more so ahead of Alabama. Now, Alabama's going to be right there with them, but the reality is if anybody looks at the way Clemson's recruiting, the performance they put on the field, the talent, and the name recognition they've got, they're the best. But what Clemson has done, and I think Florida State really failed in the last 30 years on developing this to a level that could have really been like Clemson, was you have to create that fan experience. And so I look at recruits like, recruits got really excited about Saturday Night Live with Florida State, like this event that Taggart put on. Like Bowden never put on like events like that. That just wasn't his thing. Now Bowden didn't have to, but the problem was all these other schools are building that, and they've got history. They've got these fan bases.
What do you mean? I thought you guys brought NC Hammer to the spring game.
That was last year.
Oh, okay.
That was like he does. But I'm saying, but Bowden never did. Bowden really didn't do that stuff. And the other thing he didn't do, and Fisher really started to do it and then just fell off the map, and this came out a lot, was bringing back players from the past. Bringing back the Peter Warwicks.
Yep.
Bringing back defensive players like Wadsworth and Wilson and these D-backs. And, Sanders for a while distanced himself from the Florida State program. And while he's not my favorite player, he is the most recognizable Florida State player ever. So having him not be around, I mean, God, he's got a son, and he was like, I don't know when Fisher was there, whether I'm going to bring him back. And I guess not to draw it into the people, but the experience. And if we don't have experiences, or if universities, like I'll pick some universities, North Carolina State, the reason why they're not going to take a next level in football if they don't is going to simply be because they don't create an experience that draws players to where they're playing at. Now, I have to admit, I've never been to NC State on their campus, so I don't know. Have you been to NC State?
No, I've been to Duke and Wake, and it's right near there. I mean, they've got a great fan base in terms of, like, if you watch NC State games, whether they're good or bad, they'll pack their stadium. They have trust me, they have a very solid fan base. And NC State, Dave Dorn, I mean, this is a year that, I think that they could really make some strides. They've got some awesome players. They just don't have the elite, It's like they're missing something, because I believe they're closer than people think. And year after year, NC State definitely puts multiple guys into the NFL. And decent players at that.
Absolutely. But I look at it too, and this is probably a terrible example, but it's an important example, I think, because there is some reality to it. I look at Ole Miss, and we all know Ole Miss rolled out the Brinks truck when they had their big recruiting classes, their Kimdiches and that kind of stuff. When they got Shea Patterson, you knew something was up, and obviously, and it blew up on them. But what the SEC did do, and as us as ACC fans, we used to get nuts when we go to games and they'd start chanting SEC. It's like as if like they all of a sudden now loved all 12 teams or 14 teams.
It's unbelievable.
But though the reality is that helped them, because that drug up programs like Mississippi State. I mean, look at Mississippi State. They took a guy like Dan Mullen, And Dan Mullen, regardless of what, I mean, Florida has had a lot of flops since Urban Meyer. I think Urban Meyer did some damage to that program when he left it. Not saying he didn't do some good things while he was there from a football perspective, but the point is, Florida is a sleeping giant. It's got the backup. It's got the name recognition. It's in, even though Gainesville is a dump in my mind, it is a football epicenter that easily with the right coach can be turned around. They just got to be able to flag in some recruits. But my point is, like, when you get this is the thing is Mississippi State is like an NC State, but they can still bring the SEC culture and that central focus around football. And I think that is the thing the ACC has failed to develop. And I'll give you a perfect example, like Miami, okay? Miami's failure is always going to be, one, they're always going to be under the microscope because they were the most blatant.
Well, I mean, it's criminal you know?
Right, but
it's Catholics versus convicts, right?
That's
what the Notre Dame Miami game forever stigmatized Miami, Catholics versus convicts.
And you know what? And I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. But here's the problem:
and I'm not saying it. No,
but
I'm not saying it. Really, not saying it. When I hear that, though, I don't look at it like these criminals versus these things. I look at it, the good guys versus the bad guys. Here's the clean shaven, the friggin' do it by the book guys, and here's the guys that just are it's the book smart versus the street smart.
Yep. But here's the thing: this is where Miami sold and got away with it, and not all of it was cheating, but there was definitely some stuff going on. But and by no means was Miami the only one. They just did it the best and the loudest, so they got all the publicity. But here's the thing: their failure for them now is you can't just go out and go, I'm going to go get anybody. I don't care if my kids qualify. Like, there's just too much money, and there's too much with social media. Kids, all the little things they did. And Bowden had the same thing. Like, Bowden, he had his classic boys will be boys, and that didn't play out. Once social media started, the guys started letting themselves be known. But if you think about it, now take that ability away from a Miami, and you look at a program that's a private school. It's a very hard school to get into, so the athletes stick out big time. It's a small school. It's not big. They have no university facility. They play off campus. So
it is a small school, but can you not flip that around as well into a positive? I mean, like, it's a private university. Like, it should be looked at as coming here is a privilege. To get in here, to be recruited here, get a scholarship. That's a privilege. It's not.
You can.
But you
look at the lady that was the president that left. I forget. I think she's in like politics now. Shalala.
Yeah.
But the thing is,
Shanae.
Yeah. So the thing about it,
Shalala.
So she wanted the university to be known more as an academic university, and she pulled some light away from that. But I guess my point of this is, you have a culture that even in a university like a comparable university in the SEC from a university standpoint would be Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Vandy.
But Vanderbilt, if you look, traditionally they'll bring in a few guys, but they do not. They're one of the few teams that does not fit the SEC mold. They're an academics first.
They are. Here's the thing. I think, look, to Vandy's credit, Smokin' Jay kind of flipped them around a little bit. And then Franklin came in. It's at least Rose and I. Oh, Vandy's not a pushover. They got a decent quarterback. And then Franklin came in and did a good job. Here's the other thing. We're in Atlanta, and in my mind, and I think in most people's mind, Atlanta is the epicenter of college football. Okay? It's
just because it's a center point
in the
of
South.
Major
it's the biggest city in the Southeast.
Yep.
Let me tell you another place that has grown immensely, especially having to do with football in general, and that's Nashville, Tennessee. So by proxy, they're in an area that is hugely football all around, not just college, NFL too. Like, Nashville has become a spot for football. Like, they held the draft there. They held the draft there.
That's another thing they were talking about.
They held the draft.
Media days.
See, so
yeah.
Though Vanderbilt, they're in a conference that's all football. They're in a city that's all football. Like, they have to try to adhere a little bit to that.
Right. But think about this though, and this is an absolute truth that everybody believes because I've heard it ad nauseum. SEC does not need Vanderbilt to be different than what Vanderbilt is to have an SEC brand. Everybody in the ACC believes Miami has to be one of the premier programs at this point. They have to be a core program. And that's my point is when you're leaning on core programs that don't have the I don't want to say the stature because they got the stature. But
but Florida State, the history. Okay, is that a word you're looking for? Because, I mean, if you're looking at history, like Miami's new in the conference. No, Vanderbilt was there for a while.
No, I'm talking about going to the campus. Go to the campus and go show kids around. With the exception of showing them South Beach and the Miami lifestyle. What do you show them about the campus? They are putting probably what? They're filling a third of their stadium on average per game, and they're doing it with kids from Miami-Dade Community College and Broward Community College. They're not filling it with university students. That rabid edge that they need is not there. And so here I'm going to go to the recruit. So the recruit goes there and they walk on campus and every student knows who they are and they haven't even played it down for them. They haven't even committed yet. And they put on these shows. Clemson does it. But Clemson does it the right way. But if you look at the university, and I've been at Clemson with you, the university experience at Clemson, I can tell by just walking around it, is premier.
It's premier. Like going to college. I mean, that's
premier.
Another, school in our conference who, I don't know what's going to happen to them with their new coach, but I mean, Georgia Tech. It's a smarty school. It's hard to get into, and it's in the middle of downtown Atlanta, so it's not your atypical college experience.
Okay, let's go to the stadium. Let's think about Georgia Tech. I've been many a game there, and
at least it's on campus. Students can leave their dorm. They can tailgate at their fraternity houses.
Not
walk
the best,
over to the stadium.
and then this is not totally uncommon. Not the best area around it. It's small. Go in the stadium. It's a two-sided stadium. They want because they have one of the 5 oldest stadiums in the country, so they want to keep some of that history. If you go sit on the second level, more than half the rows up, if the football gets thrown in the air, you can't see it.
Yeah.
So you got poor visibility. You can only get in on one entrance or the other. You can't cross sides of the field. So you already create this separation amongst them. And where is the center of kids to go and hang out there? Where is the place to go? Where is the place you're going to take students and say, here, let me show you what
Tech?
Yes. Where is the place you go do that at Miami? Where is
I don't know.
Right. And
that's a student. Well, I mean, I hear you if you're taking a new student, but a lot of those things you said were a fan aspect, not a recruit that would be on the field, not watching the game.
Kids are not going to college to go play college football anymore, just to go play football.
Absolutely. They talked about it yesterday or in the other day when I was watching my record of College Football Live about the facilities and how Vilma said when he went to Miami, it was about going to play for Miami. Grew up a fan of Miami. Yep. He wanted to play at Miami. He knew they put players in the NFL. He knew it was a good place for him to continue his career. And then Acho's sitting next to him, and he's like, who went to Texas a little bit later, and he's like, I got to be honest. I went to Oregon, and they were on my register, and I went to Alabama, and they were on my register because they were, it was incredible. The facilities, yes, that did matter to me. And then they were like, well, but you ended up going to Texas. He's like, I'm a hometown guy. I'm from Austin.
Okay, but let's think. Texas is one of the most storied and
right, and they have facilities and
football-centric
My point is I'm agreeing with what you said. Like the college athlete is not like, I want to go to Notre Dame because it's friggin' Notre Dame, man, and that's where you go to play football. Okay, or I grew up a fan of that team. It's not that anymore. It's the the coaching staff, it's the facilities, it's the campus. It's got so much more to do with off the field in today's day and age for recruits.
Yeah.
Than it is just being a player on the field.
So that goes back to my point. Like, think about what Notre Dame had.
Like LSU, have you seen the facilities they just dropped at LSU?
Yeah.
Dude, they are radical. And ours are awesome, and they're probably better, but they're pretty nice, dude.
But look at how the change happens, and you want to know what? This is the landscape of college football. Like, you said it with Miami. People went to Miami because it was Miami. People went to Florida State in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s because it was Florida State. And so you got to have all this. You got to have the culture, and then you got to be able to protect these kids, because now there's way more dangers for the kids, especially with social media, than there ever was. And I'm not saying they weren't doing some of the same things, but now whatever they do is everywhere. Anybody with a cell phone can catch any kid doing anything, and it's a problem. So they want leadership that's going to protect them. Like, not only are you going to turn my child into a professional athlete, which, let's be honest, there's still a lot of parents that's their number one focus.
That's unfortunate. They want him to become a young man is what they want, right. An adult.
You want him to grow up an adult, but you also want him to learn how to survive in the society that we've got now, which is very different than when we were in school. It's very different than even going into the early 2000s. It has changed. And so these kids are looking for this experience that's going to give them all of this. I mean, I think about it. Think about Oregon. Oregon started to blow up again when Knight started pouring all that money in the university. And it's not just facilities, it's the overall experience. And then you look at the university experience, and I kind of look at some of these schools that are, I would say, closer to the strength of the ACC, not the center. We're still going to say right now, the expectation was, going into the 2000s, was that these were going to be run by schools like Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech. Obviously, Clemson was a hopeful and has more than succeeded in those aspects.
Yeah, but back in 2000, you knew me. I was jazzed. I saw some good things happening. We weren't there yet.
But they're not the center. Well, how is Blacksburg developed?
It hasn't. It's regressed, bro. I mean, unfortunately, exactly. it was bound to happen because the man was getting old, and I jest when I say butt face, because I do think that he is a phenomenal coach, but
But you used to be able to survive off that, is my point. And
correct.
You cannot anymore.
Now he's not there. They bring in Fuente, who hasn't done what I thought he really. I was expecting better things. And, they've regressed. Virginia Tech was brought in not for basketball. They were one of the schools that we brought in because they were a football program that could really boost. Right. And they might have not been I would never go as far as to say as Virginia Tech can be viewed as like this. How awesome. They're like elite, like I don't know, but they were like this blue collar. You better not look past the team like this, or you better.
They were lunch.
That's why they're that. Yep. You better bring yours, because if you don't, you're going to get your butt kicked.
Yep.
Okay.
And we're going to bring an atmosphere at the game that's going to be intense.
Awesome. When they have a home game, it's intense. Enter Sandman, whether it's night or day. That's a great football atmosphere. They love it there.
But I think, like, I'll give you an example of how it's changed, and I'll use the SEC is the example. You used to think about LSU. Why was LSU a perennial football powerhouse? They were a perennial football powerhouse. They did not used to go into other people's backyards very often. They could clear some kids from West Texas, clear some kids from Mississippi, but they used to have a brick wall around the state.
Yep.
And they got good high school football programs.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But if you
they might not be all very smart or well-spoken, but some of those boys can play football.
They'd get them. And
listen,
I remember when
man,
Warwick Dunn went there, that was a huge deal because they had poached somebody out of Louisiana that never happened.
Listen, we did it a couple years ago. I mean, our expanding our brand in recruiting from outside of South Carolina, outside of it, because Dabo came in, owned the state, started leaking into Georgia, started leaking into Florida with your CJ Spillers and your Sammy Watkins. Right. Now we got DJ Uiagalelei, who's coming out from California. Travis Etienne went to high school right next, like in a town right next to Baton Rouge, and he was going to LSU, my friend. He was going until we came calling.
Yeah, but that's my point is.
So
these things, these cultures that they've created, and it's tiered levels. It's not just coach. It's not just facilities. So I go back to my original point of the ACC has not been able to do that because the recruiting game has clearly changed. It used to be Florida State owned a good portion of South Georgia, your Tifton South, mostly like the Valdosta area. They focused on West Florida. They focused on Jacksonville, Tampa, and would occasionally steal kids out of Miami because all Florida schools could tap into certain Florida markets.
Right.
But you remember when Miami was good, Florida was good, and Florida State was good, there wasn't a whole lot of dipping into Florida for other schools. And they didn't really do it. They didn't do it. Now that because that shift has happened, and I will tell you a big play on this was, it used to be, if you want to get on TV, you go to these top 10 programs. Because there was 3 channels that were going to play football, or 2 or 3. And so if you weren't on the game of the week, nobody in the NFL was finding a kid out of UCF. Nobody was finding a kid out of South Florida.
Right.
Now that we've got the Ocho, and now we really actually do have the Ocho.
We do
which is
really
crazy.
have.
There really is the Ocho.
The Ocho!
The point being, you can go anywhere. And Clemson, as an example, was able to go and do that and say, look, that's great. Like, now I know Florida State gets on TV, but Clemson, we can get on TV too. But now come to my campus. Come look at my campus. I remember when I went to school at Florida State, our campus was the size of the freshman parking lot at UF. It didn't matter. That matters now. And because of that, when Florida State rebuilt their stadium while I was there.
Well, I mean, our campus isn't that big, bro.
It's not just big, but it's
the beauty
center.
of it.
It's the,
right.
It's the center.
I mean, we have the South Carolina Botanical Gardens right there. We have the lake there. So it's not just that it's, you know, I mean,
but it's
content is quality.
But it's, yeah, right. And it's centric and it's focused in an area that is incredibly important for them. And so, and they've done it. I mean, I would say Clemson is following that. I don't want to say it's an SEC model. They're following a model of multiple schools in the SEC that kind of led the way.
Well, I mean,
and nobody.
That's how it's got to be done.
Right. But I even look at Florida State. Florida State, again, too slow, but started to change that model. They actually, the stadium used to be, when I was there, the edge of campus. They built the university center in the stadium. So instead of having this, tin can where you could look underneath and you'd see all the stadiums, they built buildings in the 4 corners and put their administrative buildings in there, and they bought up all the land on the other side, which was dumpy. A lot of kids, some kids would have houses out there, but there wasn't a lot of money out there. They've bought it so they can continue to develop it, and the campus has changed a lot. And the idea being, you've got to have that experience. Okay, so I look at it and go, if you were to have game day, okay, say NC State blows it up, say Virginia Tech blows it up. Well, Virginia Tech's probably a bad example because they have done some good game days, but if you took one of those programs, for them to get to the next level, can they show out at a
game day?
At a game day, as just one example, can they show out like these other schools? Like when they pan out at Clemson at them at game day,
this is orange, a sea of orange. Right.
They used to, when they did game day, they never panned out because all it was 100 people standing behind a screen.
I mean, that's a credit to game day. It's now become a thing. So, I mean, like, I'd hope they would.
But
I'd hope
that
Duke.
Right now?
I mean, like, look, I'd hope that if Duke
Can Pitt do that?
If Pitt knew that game day was coming, that they show up. Let's be honest. Boston College, we had game day there. They did an all right job. Remember that? There was an all right job.
But you know why they
like they've had game day at North Dakota State, and when they know it's coming, they are like, the people are out there because they're rabid about it.
They're rabid. Now, the question is, can you consistently do that? And I'll use Florida State again as a bad example of this. It's embarrassing to watch a game and to look and when they can't even pan in tight enough to show that there's empty seats.
See, this is where
empty seats.
See, this is where the video for our podcast is going to come in handy, so we can like flash up the fat guy sitting.
Okay, well, you don't need to.
Here we go again.
I'm just gonna go.
The fat guy with the rules. The professor reading his book.
Look, if you want to play prison rules in this podcast, we'll play prison rules.
No, I'm kidding. No, go ahead. When you pan out at a stadium game, I'm with you.
But you don't. But so my thing is, you won't. Remember how pissed Saban got about kids leaving at halftime for a 1AA game?
Yes.
Pissed.
Yes.
But you want to know what? The students responded. They almost felt like, oh my God, I got to do this.
Because Lord Saban will, do not defy the Lord Saban.
Right. But you know what the whole thing is? You would struggle
Your
to go
lack
back.
of attendance
You can
is
go back
bothering
to 2007. You can go back to 2007 when Florida State, with a crappy quarterback, beat Alabama. I think it was 2000. Maybe it was 2008. 2007, I think it was. We were on our
massive
descent. We were already touching the bottom of hell, and we beat them. And I remember it was like 14-7.
You weren't touching the bottom of hell, dude. Because
it was Xavier Lee.
What was it? 2013 when we were ranked like 1, and you came into our house and beat us like 55 to nothing.
That was Fisher. That was Fisher coming back. But I'm saying when we did that, Alabama, and that game was played, I believe, in Jacksonville.
So you're saying that it's sent under Bowden?
Yeah,
that was kind of the beginning of the end for Bowden.
But my point is, when Alabama was not premier, like early Saban. Premier in the sense of
they had Shula in there.
Well, no, that was Saban. We beat Saban. It was Saban's first year.
Oh, that was Saban?
It was Saban's first year. But my point was he was beginning to build it. And granted, the game wasn't in Alabama, but if you watched Alabama games that year, and hell, even going back to Shula and all those guys, or what's the other guy they had? Well, they had the one guy that got fired after one day. Was that Francione? Got fired before the season even started?
No, because I think we played Alabama in the Peach Bowl. Like somewhere in the early 2000s, and Coach Fran was the
Who
coach.
was the Price? Price was the coach that never coached. But my point was they still put people in the seats because Alabama is Alabama, and guess what? What the hell else is there to do in Birmingham, Alabama?
There's not.
Right. So until they can become the premier draw, you mentioned it earlier. Georgia Tech's gonna have that problem because it's Atlanta, and there's so much more to do. And you're competing against a true college town in Athens, in Georgia. You're dealing with a pit in the city.
you can't. They don't just take everybody. I mean, you got to be a smart person. I mean, that's the detriment of that. It's much like Vanderbilt.
Right, but if those are going to be your central football teams, and I'm not saying you dumb down your education, you better create the experience. Now, the question is, you can go about it a few different ways. You can go about it by paying the money and hiring a good coach, which schools like Boston College have that kind of money. Boston College, one of the oldest universities in the country. It's centered around 5 major universities of serious education with MIT, BU, Harvard, Northeastern. Those are all right there. So the idea is they could do something like that. Now, a lot of the younger kids are like, I don't want to go friggin' play in the cold, which you got to compete with that.
You're right.
But you got so who are they battling? They got to battle the Penn States for the kids, because kids that are willing to play in that area, they've got to go and play. They got to go do that. But then I go back to, what is your brand of football? We talked about it before, and I look at it and go, you've got a Boston College who is a Big Ten team. They play a Big Ten brand of football. Pitt, maybe. Old school Big 12 at the least, but more probably Big Ten. So then you've got your southern schools like your Florida State, Clemson, Miami, playing more of your southern speed. So you've got that. Then you've got these Carolina schools, which really can't figure out what they want to be.
No.
You got Georgia Tech, who went from a 1932 offense. Now, I'm excited that they're going to change it, because as much as they were frustrating, if you're going to go run that offense and go beat good teams, like beat a Clemson that's a top 10 team, could you do it?
You can't.
You better
do it.
win.
You can't do it.
You can't go.
You can't do it consistently over and over.
Right,
There's just no way.
All you do
You'll
is
get
ruin
figured
seasons.
out.
Right.
And once you get figured out, I mean, we've seen it before, and I've said it going into the game. You get it is frustrating playing a team like that, but the solace you have is the fact that if you are up by more than one score, and I'm not talking 2 touchdowns, if you're up 10 points, you completely put their team out of the element on offense.
Versa.
Because they'll throw the ball 2, maybe 3 times in a game.
But even more,
and then they have to do it.
But even more important than the style is, think about this. If you're going to be the team that's going to go in, and we're going to use Clemson this year, because everybody is going to, you guys are the marked team, right? Because you're the best team in really the country coming into the season.
We will have a bullseye on our back forever.
So if Georgia Tech beats Clemson, okay, and this is the problem with the brand. I'm talking old school Georgia Tech. I'm talking about the old
first game
offense.
of the year, a Thursday night in Death Valley.
Let's pretend it's the old Georgia Tech team, okay? Because right now he's got to revamp his entire recruiting. Yeah. But if it was the old team and they beat you, that's great. Only if Georgia Tech goes 11-2. But when they go like 7-5,
it just
it
diminishes the whole conference.
Right, it just ruined.
You really just diminish the whole conference,
right? Because everybody goes, well, Clemson sucks because they lost to a team that's 7-5. Even if they go 11-1 and doesn't deserve to get in, because that loss looks horrible.
Right.
And that is the problem is you have to have, like, if you're going to be the team that's going to play spoiler, you've got to make a good run. So, like, if LSU beats Alabama,
they can't shit themselves against Texas A&M.
And if LSU beats Alabama, LSU is probably an 11-2 team at worst, right? If they're that good that they beat Alabama.
They should be.
Because they play the same brand of football, so they beat them at their own game. And that's the thing is, you can't beat – it's like Wake. Wake was annoying with Grove.
Speaking of which, Wake could be better than people think this year.
Right, but when has Wake been – what, they had one season, I think, where they had –
they went to the Orange Bowl under Grove.
Right. But the point is, nobody was like elite. So until you're beating, or if you're an elite team getting beat by another elite team, it's going to look poor. And that is the problem with the brand. And they don't know how to sell it. And I still think it comes down to, how do you sell experience? Because I'm going to tell you, you and I both maybe watch a little bit of college basketball with our teams. You know, some years we're up. Florida State's been pretty good lately.
And even if we don't watch it, we may follow. We have them tagged, so we get the little notifications on our phones. So, I mean, we're interested in the outcome or what happened.
But as a student, I'm going to be honest with you. I never went to Midnight Madness. But if you go to Cameron or you go to friggin' North Carolina, that is their spring football game. Like, it's their off season, even though it's the beginning of the season, the beginning of them starting to practice. It is their epicenter. You've got to create that environment in football for at least 2/3 of your teams. And you can't do that if the students aren't into it, and you can't do it if you can't draw. And so you got to figure out what's the roadmap. Like, the ACC has to come out with a message. It's like we're salespeople, right?
Right.
You've got to have a message that is consistent and stays on point. You have to be able to tell people who you are. And I think the ACC has failed miserably in football, especially when they had that shining moment of bringing in Virginia Tech and bringing in Miami to do that. And they failed to do it because they all thought they could exist as they were and make it successful, when the reality is they're all different. And Miami wasn't really different from Florida State and Clemson so much as they were just at the wrong time.
Right.
Because they started to come back down.
I hear you. I mean, so what, you're talking a lot about it. So then, you got the network drop. Then what do? We're fans. We're fans of the conference. We have the schools we went to are in the conference. So, I mean, with Swafford's words saying, big business is here in football, and we are still known. I mean, like, look, the stigmatism is changing a little because of Clemson, but we are still known. If you talk basketball, everybody's like, okay, the ACC's is one of the top, if not the top conference in basketball. So what is it then? Because what is that image? Do you try to be? Because as much as I would love to say it, I mean, we've beaten the SEC in the national championship. We're not going to overtake them in the stigma that we're the football conference ever, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not looking to do that.
But compete with them,
right?
Big Ten,
but then,
compete with the SEC, even
and we have been on the field.
No. You haven't. You haven't,
dude.
No, let me explain to you why. Because we're not talking about Clemson. We're talking about or just Clemson. We're talking about the ACC versus the SEC.
I am talking about the ACC
but my point
versus
is this.
the SEC.
Right now, there is nobody that believes that our conference is anything more than Clemson and everybody else. And for 20 years, it was Florida State and everybody else. The problem that's a major problem. Alabama is still premier right now. Alabama is still the class of the SEC. And it's not, though. There's still Georgia. There's still LSU. There's the Gators. Those teams are not forgotten. Those are still – the LSU-Florida game is still a huge game. The Georgia-Auburn game is still a huge game. My point is, besides whoever plays Clemson, what's a huge game? What's a huge game this year? You could say Florida State-Miami because of history. You're talking about two teams that were garbage last year. Florida State way more garbage than Miami. Miami was not even considered. Miami didn't even play for the title, the ACC title. So again, and I go back to, if I was Swafford, here's what I'm going to do. We have to do one of two things immediately. We either have to redo the divisions, which I don't think is the best course, because I don't think I still think it's Clemson and everybody else. So even if you took Florida State and put them on the opposite side to try to create a title game, but if you're not going to do that, you had better focus on the Coastal Division and getting it competitive, because that end of the year game better mean something, because it's the only conference where it hasn't meant anything since its inception. When is the last time that game was played with a 2-loss team being the worst team?
No, it's not. I mean, you're not wrong. All the conference championships that are out there out of the Power 5 schools, that's the one that's it's one team. It's not two teams.
Yeah, but you're not premier until you're not premier until you have had a couple of championship games. I think within no more than a 4-year period where they have single-digit numbers.
Look, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, but I mean, I think that look, you can just like a sales guy, like we are. You can spin a story any way you like it to benefit yourself, okay? And you could look at, there's statistics, this as well as anybody out the yin-yang. You could pull statistics to prove that the ACC has been right there with the SEC in terms of matchups over the past several years and the outcomes of those games.
No, I don't deny that.
And I hear what you're saying. What I'm saying is the same thing, I guess, topic, or the same thing that you're trying to address that the conference needs to tackle can be looked at or viewed in terms of where we stand now and where we need to go in various different lights.
Okay, but here's my point: is the light that matters, which is the light to the recruits.
Because
it's all about it's all.
It is the recruit. Because what is the light? Because to the public with the media, I don't think that there is some specific goal to reach in terms of that.
Well, let me say
I do agree with you with the recruits.
Let me say this. Think about it this way: 3:30 Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love the SEC. I watch, if it's not my team, I watch the SEC game over any other game. On average, I do. Because it's usually, because I'm just looking for the best.
It's compelling
game.
Football a lot of times.
It is. So here's
best athletes, best coaches, best teams.
Until to sell a brand, and we're talking about the ACC brand. To sell a brand, you have to sell something that has value. Number one, but you also have to have a message. And I still struggle to look at it and go, what is the ACC? Because that's Swaffer's job. Clemson's job is to go out and beat everybody and be a national champion, and they shouldn't have any other job than that. But I've also got to go, how do I make it so it baffles me. Like, I think about the year Florida State won the national championship in 2013. I'm going to feel like a fool if I'm wrong, but it was the year I think they played Duke for the title game. ACC. They played. I don't think it was Pitt. I think it was Duke. Yeah, it was Duke because I remember Cutcliffe had his panties in a twist.
Okay.
So it was Charlotte won is a crappy venue.
I know.
It's an outdoor game. It was played in the rain. It was sloppy. Florida State smoked them. Duke had like 4 losses on the season. It was the 8 o'clock game, head-to-head with another title game, which I can't remember if it was the Pac-12 or whether it was the SEC. I think the SEC was during the day. I think
SEC is usually like 6 o'clock game.
Okay, but my point was it was garbage. Who'd you guys play? Pitt last year? Wasn't it Pitt?
Yeah, I think it was Pitt.
And it was slop. In the rain, outdoors in Charlotte, not totally filled stands because Pitt's not traveling. And it was garbage. Like, I watched the game, and I watched it with you. And I was cheering for you, and it was great. It was a great win for you guys because you guys, even in crappy weather, just lit them up. It was a joke. But that's the point is, it's only great for Clemson fans.
Are you finished?
I just think that's important.
I don't think that you're wrong. I went to the national.
Thank you. Let's get that.
I went to the national. Now I will interject. I went to the national championship game. It cost me a lot. The tickets. I've been to the past 3 that we've been in, including that last year. Okay, the tickets.
He's a closet millionaire.
The tickets were extremely easy to come by this year.
Crappy venue. Crappy whole thing.
Everybody. It cost. Your like life savings to get there, and we're not talking round trip direct. We're talking
Santa Clara, California.
Yeah.
Is that where it was?
You're talking every Alabama and Clemson fans alike were walking off their airplanes, locked in arm, arms locked, like when Clemson walks out on the field, looking at each other like, what the fuck are we doing out on the West Coast? College football, especially the national championship, doesn't belong here at least until the Pac-12 starts to really get back in order. Like, what the fuck are we doing out here? No one, I promise you, I've been to the national championships against Bama in Tampa and in Arizona. No one wanted to be out there, okay? So, one of the big things that I said to the guy I went with, who's an Alabama fan, is because it was an outdoor venue and the weather, we left Atlanta, was shit raining. We got there, it was shit raining. Plus, it's on the coast, so it was windy as all get out. I'm all for playing teams in the elements. It's football, not for the national championship
I
game.
agree 100%.
I do not want the national championship game to come down to a play where, the quarterbacks or running backs going outside. We've got him, I got guys on a line, step in the grass, and it just like go.
You want to see the best athletes play their best.
Let me finish.
Play their best.
Yeah, right. And all of a sudden, he falls down because of the turf or the field, and the guy scores, and that's the difference in the game. We don't want to see that in the national championship game. Now, you talk about us playing Pitt and all that. And it being a compelling matchup. Okay? I get it. You're right. Okay?
If you're not Clemson, it's not right.
But
right? Is that true?
What?
If you're not a Clemson fan, I'll say maybe a Pitt fan because maybe you knock Clemson out of a title game. But if you're not one of those,
here's
fans,
the difference.
Here's
the difference. It's just like the difference in recruiting. Okay, how it's not just about going to play ball at the school you grew up loving. It's got a lot of ancillary factors. It's the same thing with the games and people watching nowadays. Okay. What did I say before? And I'm going to jump to the NFL because I'm a New York Giants fan and season ticket holder. What did I say about the fact that we lost Odell Beckham? One of the main reasons I was pissed that we gave him up, because I'm a season ticket holder and I don't give a shit how good or bad we are. He will sell tickets. Well, guess what? That is starting to happen in college. Even if it's a blowout, they want to see Deshaun Watson doing his thing. People will keep it on to see these amazing. Yes, okay. We've got amazing skill players in the conference, dude, and it's not just at Clemson, dude. Bradley Chubb was exciting to watch at NC State, man. I'm not a fan. That guy was badass. A.J. Dillon's really a pretty damn good back, and if it's the 3:00 game and there's no other game, yeah, I'm more than likely to be paying attention mostly to the SEC. But if that team's playing, I want to see some of those stud players they've recruited that possibly we went after too.
Are you watching? So here's a question for you. Are you watching Boston College play Wake Forest over Mississippi State playing Florida last year just to watch A.J. Dillon if the score is 34-6?
There's neither. Because unless it's my team, and even when it's my team, I'll flip back and forth.
You know why?
I won't watch one over the other.
But let me say
I will give them attention in just the same regard.
Right. Well, and
keep in mind, I'm a Clemson guy and I'm a football guy. So I'll watch other ACC teams, especially on the Atlantic side, whether they have studs or not, just to see especially if we haven't played them or if we have, based on our outcome, to see what they're going to do.
Bingo,
so I will will watch it based on for our benefit. Yes, becomes a personal benefit.
So let me ask you this question then: how many games in ACC heads-up games have mattered to other teams in the conference as much as SEC games have mattered? Meaning, if you've got 3-4 losses and you're playing a team that's got 2 losses versus two teams that are undefeated.
Say it again.
How many times has another ACC game as compared to an SEC? How many times have those other games mattered on the national and the conference landscape? Usually, this is the sad part, usually our conference winners in the ACC, in the Atlantic, which is by far the better division, historically, just look at it from an end schedule game.
No, right. How many
times has that game mattered on a national landscape, because here's the thing is, if you want to have a strong brand,
you're talking like ranked matchups of the week that are good ranked matchups.
Just mattered.
Maybe
it mattered. You guys have won the conference. We have won the conference, with the exception of 2013 when you guys were 5 and we were 3.
So outside of Clemson, because even if we play Boston College, you see that it matters.
Let me ask you a better question.
Because if we lose, then it could dethrone us from the Atlantic.
Let me ask you this. In the last 10 years, we'll go back 10 years. When is the last time that anybody besides Clemson or Florida State has mattered on the national landscape in November?
I mean, Virginia Tech, probably right at the beginning of that.
National landscape.
On the national landscape, right? Probably 10 years ago, probably right at the beginning of that.
So in November, this is 2009. This is 2009 is where we're going back to.
And when did they come into the conference?
It was early mid 2000s. I want to say 2003.
Yeah. I mean, Louisville.
On the national landscape. In November.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me what year that was that Louisville was
2 years ago, Lamar Jackson.
Okay, was Louisville
because
a potential contender for a national title in November? Potential. Doesn't have to be a definite.
It might be like the last weekend in October, and I don't know that we played them, and I don't know after that loss I think they were still in contention after losing to us.
I mean, the SEC has had Georgia, Alabama. You've had some Stanford, USC's, Oregon's. Later in the year,
you realize if Stanford wins the conference this year, that's 4 out of the last 10 years they are the Pac-12 champ.
But that's my point.
I love David Shaw.
But that's my point is the ACC has to have more of that in order to create a brand.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're going, and I'm not gonna 100% disagree with you. I'm just to disagree, just to have another side of it. I think that again, to my point, those ranked matchups are the probably the pinnacle, the premier. That would probably be the first choice. But I would say, I mean, like there are many Saturdays where there aren't compelling matchups on the board. It's just matchups, and I'll watch just because of certain guys on the field that have some serious talent.
Right. And how about here's another reality, and I'd have to go back and look because I don't know the answer, but I feel pretty strong that I'm pretty on point with this. When's the last time the loser of our title game is looking at a January 1st bowl game?
Or some sort of contention. Yeah. We haven't in a while. We have not in a while. We have, Actually,
how many guys have we put in the BCS and BCS
actually,
games?
I don't know. I think, to believe it or not, I think that going into the ACC championship game, was it 3 years ago we played North Carolina? I think they were. I really think under Fedora that year, I think they were undefeated going into our game. If not, they lost like the week before.
Are you talking about the title game?
The ACC championship game.
They were not undefeated going to the title game. We've never had we've never had an undefeated team going to the title.
No, then they were they were one loss, and the story was if North Carolina beats us in the ACC championship game, they will get into the playoff because they were one loss, and if they beat us in the championship, they would because there were. I'm sorry. That is where my point comes in. That was the only year I think that the ACC in the college football era had any iota of conversation about potentially having two teams get into the playoffs. Because if we had lost, then by the order of things, North Carolina should get the bid. But because of it was us, we may get also a bid. Right?
They finished the year in 2015 11-3.
Right. So, and they lost. Did they lose? They lost in their bowl game. So, and they lost to us. So they went into that ACC championship game with one loss, and we had none. And if they had beaten us, then we'd both have one loss. They would have the head-to-head against us. We didn't play them during the year. They would go to the playoff. The question then lies, with our one loss to them in the championship, would we still be considered to qualify for a fourth spot? That was the only year in the college football playoff era that I can remember the ACC potentially had two teams of consideration that could make it in the playoffs. Now we know how all that shook out. We beat the crap out of him, and it was
and the fact
over.
Is this goes
but
back
that
to the
was
brand.
to what I think you're trying to say, because if it is what you're trying to say, I hear you loud and clear. The SEC in the college football playoff era, the SEC has had two teams to at least be considered, I think, every year, if not at least 3 or 4 out of the 5 years. Big Ten has had multiple teams, Penn State and Ohio State, maybe a little Michigan, at least 3 of the 5 years, if not more.
Still playing on New Year's.
Oklahoma, okay, it has, despite the fact that they've owned it, and Texas, did well against them during the regular season and beat them this year and then lost in the Big 12 championship game. And it wasn't Texas every year, but every year in the Big 12 there is, like Oklahoma State the year before that. Remember that game? Yep. They were a team that was considered. So they've had multiple teams.
Games more that mattered in November.
Right.
Yep.
And the SEC we know. And then you go out to the Pac-12 and yeah, even there too, as crappy as they are, it's Stanford, again, to my point, this year, if they win it, will be, they will be the most winningest team in the conference over the last decade. You got Utah coming on, Washington, Oregon. Those teams have been, considered. Washington made it 1 year.
My point is, it's more than just the two elites.
Yes, I'm disagreeing on the front end, agreeing on the back.
But I will tell you to the brand. Let me use this as I'll use that team, the 2015 Tar Heels, as my point to the brand. And the brand is not determined by me. I'm an ACC guy. I love Florida State football. I love watching a team like Clemson play. As much as I like to watch them lose every now and then, I do. They're a fantastic team and a great, great representative for us. That Tar Heels team that lost to Clemson in 2015 went on to play in the Russell Athletic Bowl and lost to Baylor 49-38. You got the Russell Athletic Bowl. If you lost to Clemson, and that year was that was a playoff year, right? Yeah, it was a playoff year. So you went to the playoffs that year.
Yep.
If you lost to a team that went to the playoffs to go 2 losses, they still only got the Russell Athletic Bowl with 2 losses.
I know.
With 2 losses. 2 loss teams were being considered in the SEC. And again, this isn't about ACC versus SEC. This, to me, is about, it is because the whole point is we want to compete with them, right?
Right.
So,
right.
And we want to compete with them because they got the huge network contract. We want to compete with them because they're pulling players out of our regions. We want to do all that. So my point is they have a brand, and the recognition of the brand will does not come from we create the brand, but we don't get the recognition from the brand. That's done on the national scale, and on the national scale, we don't get it. And that's a perfect example, playing in the Russell Athletic Bowl after losing to a team that went to the college playoffs with only 1 loss. And you got the Russell Athletic Bowl.
But the where is the Russell Athletic Bowl?
I think that's out on the West Coast. I want to say it's in San Francisco.
The Russell Athletic Bowl?
Isn't it?
I think it's in the Carolinas.
They changed the name.
Or Florida. It's in the South.
Hold on.
It's in a there is.
You're playing Baylor. You're not playing a regional game. You're playing Baylor.
Yeah, but it's regional for us.
Hold on. Let me find it.
I mean, they're going,
which is now called the Camping World Bowl.
They will put teams
Orlando, Florida. You're right.
Yeah, they will put teams in bowls that are regionally closer for their fan bases as well. Sometimes, if you're not in the big games, then they're going to allow the fan base to travel. I hear what you're saying, but
that's another big point. That's a huge point you just made. Brands travel. They travel. Baylor's not a brand, but they're traveling to Orlando. Now, I don't know what the attendance was, but the point is, you just said it yourself. Alabama and Clemson had no business playing in Santa Clara, California.
Correct.
And they did, and you just said It was a pain in the ass.
Oh,
all these things.
I'm telling you, dude, Alabama and Clemson fans, no.
Exactly.
But I will tell you, they weren't filled with all Alabama and Clemson fans. There were guys sitting in front of me that were 49 or season ticket holder, had a PSL, and had the option to buy, and they bought
one of the best football games in the world.
So they were filled, but it wasn't all the fans. But yeah, I'm kid you not, like high-fiving between Clemson and Alabama fans in agreement that we should not be fucking out here.
Right, but so my point is, though, they traveled, and that's about as bad of a distance as you're going to find for those two teams.
Fuck.
And you're talking about Alabama fans that, you're not talking about a rich area, so even the Alabama non-alumni, because that's the other big thing is, do you have non-alumni fan bases that are very strong?
Right.
And you go back to, like, Clemson, there's not a whole hell of a lot out there. There's enough distance between a major city. I mean, Florida State struggles with that because if you take if Florida State, and I don't know if this is still true, but I would venture to say it is. If the school and the government are not in session in Tallahassee, the population of Tallahassee drops by more than half. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. But so my point is, do you have enough local fan base? And that's part of the problem is when the people from Atlanta and the people from Tampa and the people from Orlando, which are the three biggest places that people move from, at least they did when I was there in Tallahassee, that's the areas they move from. When they go, F it, I'm not traveling 3 to 5 hours to go watch my team play. That's a problem. That's a problem, and that's a brand problem, and that's one of our. That has to be one of our pinnacle teams, not one of our.
Oh well, I mean, then that's a
teams.
university thing. Drawing, I mean, and especially in today's day and age, you know how much it costs to go to school. In-state is so much more preferable. Schools themselves are going to always go in-state in terms of taking students before they go outside. Okay, that's going to be their first priority. So then, how do you spread the fan base around the country? Because not a lot. There are Clemson fans that traveled to the BC game, and it happens every year. We have great, but a lot of it is we have a lot of Clemson fans in the Northeast because we'll bring in students from all over the country.
And you do that by having
and it's not just recruits; it's students.
It's brand. And I will tell you, Florida State. If you look at it, actually, even though I'm making that point, Florida State has historically been a well-traveling team.
Absolutely,
they've been a well-traveling team.
And I know you guys are on the downswing, but listen, man, the area as well as I do. When we're head to head, we may be seething, from our teeth, just vile words to each other. But at the end of the day, I need Florida State to be what Florida State is,
and that is, I guess, that kind of to put a bow on this, and maybe it's a place where we can kind of cut it is. That is the idea I'm saying is that until we create that brand, we're going to struggle to have that. And as somebody that goes to university where I expect us to be a top tier, you and I have talked about it many a time, we take one loss, our one loss kills us.
You're done. Now, Clemson.
It shouldn't be that way.
Clemson has the benefit of doing what they've done the past few years that, they were talking about it even yesterday. I was watching one of the college football live recordings about how, we have A&M coming the second week to Clemson. If Clemson were to lose that game, it is Jimbo, and he knows the D-line's gone. He typically knows how to, scheme against your weakness. Everybody on the set was in agreement. Even if Clemson loses, they will still be considered.
No, because
that's us.
But
that's us. That's not the rest of the conference.
But because there's a belief that the SEC, flawed or not, there's a belief that that's not a bad loss.
I'm sorry.
There's not a belief that there's a bad loss.
I understand that, but
you're making that point.
I'm sorry I brought Texas A&M up.
But sure,
I'll bring up two other teams.
I don't think it's wrong.
Syracuse and Pitt lost to both of them during the season. One of the year that was the year one of the years we got considered on the outside looking in because we had that loss, and we still got the consideration.
You can't. I will tell you.
But
right
again,
you can't lose to Syracuse. You can't lose to Syracuse if Syracuse has 3 or more losses. I'm going to tell you that right now.
I think they did that year.
I
know that when we lost to Pitt, they had like 4 losses that year. The fact of the matter is look, I'm not disagreeing. I hear what you're saying because it's Clemson. We've put ourselves in that position the past few years to get a consideration like that. Would Virginia, if they come on this year and have 1 loss and win but they beat us in the conference championship, with that 1 loss against who knows else they played this year. they still may be a question to make it. So we've put ourselves in position. The rest of the conference hasn't. So you're right. Like it's going to be very hard until we start to step it up as a whole for, multiple teams in the conference to get consideration for the playoff with or without winning, with or without a loss, not without, with a lot, maybe one loss. We haven't gotten to the point where we've had a 2-loss team in the playoff, and that eventually I will assume will happen. But
I just want us to take the step where a 2-loss team in our conference gets a major bowl bid or a January bowl bid.
I hear you.
That's what I really want to see. I don't even need to see in the playoff because the playoff's a tricky picture. It's such a tricky picture. You're not going to get it, unfortunately, in the ACC anytime soon until I think I go back to where I said my point is you got to go to the Coastal and probably the Coastal because your losing conference team needs to be a powerhouse.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're going to wrap this first section because I really wanted us to get talking about coaching.
It's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. Coaching is irrelevant.
What? Wait, what?
Well, and now we'll discuss. And now we'll discuss
how great they aren't. It's funny because and I'm not pulling these topics from. I listen to a lot of shit. You know that.
Yep.
One of the ideas for me creating this was, like I said, fantasy, NFL, and college football in one because, I'm living in Atlanta, and as in most cities, the local sports talk, unless it's a major city, maybe like New York, where it might have more coverage, but in like Atlanta, it's mostly Atlanta talk. So I listen to the satellite, but I have to listen to 3 stations, not just one station to get it all at once.
Right.
So anyways, where was I going? I can't remember where I was going.
Coaching.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I'm not taking this information or this conversation, this topic about coaching from anywhere, but it just so happens that there was a lot of conversation about it on, I heard this week on ESPNU on Sirius Satellite. I think it says Channel 84, as well as, again, on like the game day or, College Football Live. And there was a lot of conversation about in particular, the coaching changes this year, as there are. At this time of year, if you're talking coaches, for the most part, it's about, who's new or who's on the hot seat this year. Right. So, let's get into it. I mean, I don't just want to talk about that. I mean, in my mind, college football coaches, number one, from the game standpoint, if you, as a fan, whether you're a knee deep into college football like we are, or even just a casual fan, or even not at all, like coaching in college football is everything. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, it is. You've seen what it's done to programs with coaches that know how they have a vision. Mm-hmm. They surround themselves with people they believe can get the job done and that buy into that vision and will execute as such. And then they implement that amongst the players and get them to do the same. So, I think it's huge. But from that standpoint, I also think, as a whole, I think one of the great things, and I think one of the reasons college football has gotten to the notoriety it has is because, granted, there's these amazing talents scattered throughout the country on some of these teams, but, it's the coaches off the field, because they're the ones that are answering questions in the pressers and all this, that, and it's the coaches that become your main characters of the movie, kind of.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I'm glad to see Les Miles, speaking of new coaches, coming back to college football. Guy's incredible. From a coaching standpoint, I think he's a great coach. From one of the characters that makes up this great thing we love, which is the college football season, out of this world.
So he eats grass.
Oh God, I love him. There's a reason the guy got some little role in some, what was that, space movie or something. He was got some movie. Like, guy's a character, man.
Yep.
So, I want to talk about that too. We'll go on for days, I'm sure, at some point about my guy, and that's not Dabo Swinney. That's Mr. Mike Leach. I've loved Mike Leach since they gave him the stigma of the mad scientist.
Yep.
I love we have to have him since Les is gone.
Yep.
And we had to have Les kind of become that character when the old ball coach left. Okay.
Yep.
And the old ball coach left my team's rival. I don't give a flip. Great coach, phenomenal personality for college football. Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, this is really like that. I don't just want to talk about coaching changes, people on the hot seat. I just want to talk about this, the fun side of it. Like, I think they're like what makes some of these guys so great is in my mind, some of them don't have that success on the field that you hope. There are a few seasons under Les Miles that were less than spectacular when they were expected to do great things.
Yep.
Okay, but he still was awesome. Like you said it, he's eating grass. He's
making the crazy fourth down call that nobody and their mother would make.
The guy gets an oppressor, and it's like a comedy act. You can't just by the tone of his voice sometimes, and the way I'm gonna run. It's just funny. It's just funny. It's like maybe he's like, wait a minute, is he being serious or is he being sarcastic?
Right.
It's like,
right.
wait a minute, it's great.
Right.
So, I want to talk about things like that and kind of blend it in. I don't care where we start. I just thought it was funny. I think I saw that. I hadn't seen that that E60 on Mike Leach.
Yep.
I sent you that text with him with the George Costanza on the bearskin rug and his boxers.
Right behind him with his face on it.
Oh, man, I love Mike Leach.
Well, if you think about it, he was... You call him the mad scientist. If you really think about it, I guess I'd have to go back and do a little bit more research, but he revolutionized
West Coast, the air raid attack.
Yeah, and just in a way, I kind of look at him a little bit like, because I just happened to see parts of this movie the other day, like Moneyball with the Billy Bean and the stats. Like, he took what I guess I would say norms of football and kind of turned them on their ear, and then had success.
Yep.
Which is, that's
scary.
Kind of
the mad scientist.
Yeah, and it's scary because you got two avenues to go with that. You either become the laughing stock,
right,
and the embarrassment, or you invent something that's so spectacular that you become the cutting edge. And,
how great is that?
And he pulled it off.
Okay, so like it's entrepreneurial. Because an entrepreneurial, the definition of an entrepreneur is pretty much a risk taker.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what he's doing. I mean, like, that's how great is that? I mean, it kind of defies your traditional coaching style.
Absolutely.
Your traditional coaches and the way they come up. They don't want to have risk like that. The reason they've put their time in and come up the ranks and sat behind, done this, that, and the other is to earn that spot and have it be a solidly earned spot based on your credentials, your experience, what you bring to the table, right?
Yep.
But this, it's that too, but he's going out there, putting that on the line because you said it, like, it's risky. What if it falls on his face? Now, maybe, when he started at Texas Tech, the coach hot seat situation gets more volatile each year. The impatience, and we're in a society that is instant gratification.
Yep.
So, the 1 year, again, I had asked it to you as a Florida State fan after last year because it was real bad.
Yep.
Are they going to stick with him? I know he's just been, but to even raise that question is only something in today's day and age. Because even a decade ago, you'd at least give the guy a couple, 3. You should give him 4 or 5 to get through a recruiting class in the system. That's the way I see it, unless it's just so awful, right?
Yeah, it's Well, if you think about it, you brought it up at the very, very beginning, what you just said. The idea that coaches are the face, and this is, to me, what separates college football from the NFL. And it really comes down to the players themselves. Players in college are not allowed to express themselves, social media and public, the way NFL players are. So in the NFL, the players get to be the stars. And I'm not always talking it's a good thing. It's famous and infamous all in one shot.
Yep.
But they get to be the stars. And players, even though there is a lot of free agency, and especially in the NFL with all the cut deal, like everybody can get cut, and not a lot of guaranteed contracts, the idea is that a lot of the star players outlive their coaches in the NFL. As they say, it's the NFL stands for not for long.
That's correct.
So
and to the point I made before about like coaches in college being like the characters of it. I mean, we're talking they're the lead role. You know, that's who they are. When you talk about it and look at it from a professional light, they're supporting cast at best.
Yeah, and I mean, you look like take your top 5 teams coming into this year in the NFL, and you're going to talk about teams like San Diego, Kansas City, the Bears, Eagles. Some of those types of teams that had good years that are expected to have good years again. The reality is there wasn't a whole lot of turnover on those teams. Now they might have had a big name here, a big name there. But it's the teams that are trying to transition from the bottom or the middle to the top. Like you see a Cleveland team that completely revamped a lot of portions of their team. They still had the Mayfields. They had Garrett Miles. So, again, the athletes get to be who they are. And you can see it's a fight between the NFL and today's NFL player to determine how they're going to be. It used to be like, look, if you want a contract, you're not going to act like a fool out in public. Now they can do whatever the heck they want. I mean, we got players, one of your former boys, that's got him in a model in some foreign country with Coke on the bed, like, of course, that was never proven. But my idea is they can be in college football. You can't be that risky. And so in college, and think about this, college is the only, not the only, it is the version where every coach has to reinvent their team every year, and it's part of the design. So, and therefore, you have to be large enough to attract people. Coaches really aren't attracting free agents anymore. Cities, in any sport. I mean, look at basketball. Basketball's a disaster with free agency in the sense it's like, okay, what cool city do you want to live in?
It's not about the city in basketball. Yeah, it's about, okay, let me go play with.
Yeah, I'll go collude with these guys, and we'll say, hey, do you want to play in South Beach? Do you want to play?
Collude is a great word.
That's an American word right there.
Go. I'm going to go collude with another bunch of superstars.
And pick the city we want to live in, and that's how it is. And then you look at it. I mean, look at it. Like the Clippers went from to, you know what?
They're better, but they're not great, but they've got some names on the team.
They just pick some big names. And that's the point is, and that can flip that sport on its ear every day. So my point is with college, and you think about it, now here is the challenge. You've got to do it, and the situations that you do it in are all very unique. You and I talked about this on a previous podcast, and you were asking me about Taggart and where they're at versus with Dabo. There is every situation is very, very relative in college football. So to me, you look at the recycling of formerly known good coaches and how well they're going to do in other places. And a lot of them don't measure up because it has to do with that atmosphere and it has to do with the way it works. But going back to a guy like Mike Leach is a guy that fights convention. If you look, he's still relatively, I don't want to call it blackballed, but I think his career has suffered for some of the things that he's done that's been convention because people fight change. They fight convention.
For those that really need to know, the E60 was like 20 minutes.
Right. And,
the intro of the show, it's called The Outsider. It's called The Outsider. The episode's called The Outsider. We talked about it the other day about his dismissal from Texas Tech. I don't want to dive into it, but they explain it very clearly in the show. The guy's a little quirky, to say the least, and he's in a place that the boosters, who fund all big schools, are probably these good old boy Texas oil tycoons, and that weirdness is just not something they're all about. Winning can, yes, it can, make a lot of things go the other way. Heritage, though, that might be the one thing that can trump things like that.
It does,
a situation as such.
But just think about it, though.
The dismissal was because of something different, so they say. But as I started watching that, look, I'm not saying it just because I like Mike Leach. The guy is an attorney. He went to law school. Like, he is a smart guy. And he helped me read between the lines in that situation. And it seemed pretty clear to me, with me as a guy that's experienced, a lot in this world and been around in different business and business owners and way people, decision makers think, and just watching and looking, that could very easily have been the situation. There was one little thing that happened. That was their out. Actually, again, I'm going to retract it. That's what happened at Washington State, and he hadn't gotten left with. But it was there. They were trying to renegotiate his contract, he said. He wasn't having it, because why are you going to renegotiate to the same or to a lower level when you've done better? And that was their way to get out of the contract when he screwed up.
I've been in business many a time where it's like, we want to make a change. We don't have a justification. Somebody find me a reason. And I think with him, they did that. But I look at it, and it has to do with norms. It has to do with norms of the sport and what they're looking for. And, in some ways people want a puppet. Like, for example, Alabama can hire any puppet they want, because they've got the money, the boosters, the backing. But the reality is, Saban's like, I'm not going to be a puppet, but he came in with a credibility that Alabama hadn't seen since Stallings in '92. So
but to your point, and not to, I want to continue on the path, but what you said just a couple minutes ago, like having to do what these college coaches do, but with a whole new regime of like kids every year. Saban runs the program at Alabama like a business. Literally like a business.
Yeah.
And that's how they do. That's how he's able to
and let's say this
through that.
He was
with the new players and with the new coaches they have every year.
He was, let's be honest, him, and you said the old ball coach, another character. You could talk about translation. Those are two guys that were humbled by the NFL because it wasn't the same
their
process.
Stick.
Yeah, it wasn't there, and they were humbled by it. And I think you look at it, and with leadership, like I look at it, like, I mean, come on, we're talking about the Texas Tech Red Rectums before he got there. Nobody cared about those guys.
Correct.
Nobody even knew who the hell they were.
But see, that's it. Like he took, and then so they want to renegotiate his contract to the same or less when he literally turned that program around. Come on, dude, that's not fair.
No, but I said
in
just
business, that's not fair.
Give you the reason.
That's right.
I know what I want to do. Give me the reason.
That's right.
And that's a setup.
He was a fall guy for it. He took a fall not because of anything more than an opinion or an attitude. It had nothing to do with how he did his job.
And the thing they had on him was, and part of it was, truthfully, is the program he's in, is that you, in today's day and age, with the money that they spend, the boosters and the heads of these athletic clubs want either one of two things. They want an endless stream of money coming in, which is done through winning and tradition, or they want a guy they can control. And I'll tell you, that's Fisher at Florida State. That's part of the reason why he claims that he left. I think there was a little bit more to it, but I think that was a big part of it. I think it was the majority part of it is he wanted to do things his way, and some people didn't like some of the avenues he was going down. And so he kept making it tougher and tougher on the university. He had all the leverage, which is how he ended up in a $75 million guaranteed contract for 10 years. And they lost. They lost in that. Now, I don't know that they lost because I think Fisher, for other reasons, as we've talked about before, started stepping away from Florida State. And a lot of it was personal. Yeah, which is fine.
You were on that. You saw it coming.
Yeah, I did.
You saw it coming before their decline.
I thought it was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen 2 years before that. But I
feel like you saw it coming in Winston's last season.
Yeah. Well,
because of all the chaos that maybe he brought to the table, and that just starts to show you lack of control.
And Fisher allowed him. That was that. And again, there was a great article. I think the guy's name was Matt Hayes about it, and he talked about he talked to some past coaches, nobody by name. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. But the article was actually really well written about how he left the program. But at the same time, Fisher is still a massive, massive name. He is certainly right now considered one of the top 5 coaches in college football. So, he's got leverage, and there's very few guys that have that kind of leverage. And Mike Leach was one of those guys that didn't have that leverage. And so therefore he's suffered for it. So I think really when it comes down to coaching is, it goes back to, and it's kind of like Harbaugh right now. Harbaugh has leverage. Let's be honest. In Michigan, has Harbaugh produced anywhere near the expectation and the money he's getting?
No, and I don't know whether to be shocked or not, because going in, and again, got to give the guy at least, how long has he been there? 4? 5?
Sounds about right. 4
right?
years sounds about right.
So you got to give the guy more than a season. So say 2. Even the first 2, even after the first season, which the first season he was there showed promise. But he's coming off of being a successful NFL coach. Like he really, man, he did well at the NFL ranks, and then however,
then he started to fade.
Side,
but he started to fade
the past few years. So like I said, I don't know whether it's a good or, because now it's like clear as day. It's like, I don't think it's working out with him. I don't think I think the window has closed at Michigan for him.
Well, here's something to go back, and let's do a little bit of history on Harbaugh. Okay, and he's a little near and dear to my heart because he was a Bears draft pick.
Yes.
He played for the Bears. Think about where
good quarterback for him.
He was okay. He was not great.
Phil Simms wasn't great.
Well,
but I love him.
Phil Simms was also a Super Bowl winner, so I'll give him a little bit of credit.
But I mean, like,
but here's the thing is, okay, and I can
see what I'm saying,
right?
Like, he's not like Tom Brady, no, but I could like that guy.
I could write the dynamic very similar. Think about this. Okay, so in today's NFL, is the hard ass coach successful anywhere other than New England? I can't think of anybody that's...
I'm trying to.
Right.
And
it's players, coaches. Why?
But listen, don't get it twisted. Belichick comes off media-wise like it's just this discipline, and it is strict. Nick Saban runs a business, and so does Belichick. And when the players walk in there and the coaches right out the gate, they're all bought in. I don't think it. I think Alabama's more of a strict environment than New England is.
Well, I still remember when Eddie Jackson came in as a freshman, as a rookie with the Bears, and his first thing is they said, "How do you feel about your first training camp?" And he goes, "It was pretty easy." He goes, "You remember I went to Alabama?"
That's right.
So
I told you earlier, the standard, like there's a lot of things that Dabo and Saban are just like exactly the same, the way they run the programs. Where they aren't the same is like polar opposites. And one of them's that. Saban, the way Saban holds it, and not that Dabo doesn't hold the kids to a standard, but it seems more pressurized for the player at Alabama, where it's more relaxed for the player at Clemson. Okay?
Yeah. I'd say he's created a culture, and I go back to like being able to create a culture, but let me stay to this on the idea what I was talking about thinking about Harbaugh.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so Harbaugh's coach in college was who? You remember?
Was it Holtz?
No.
Oh, wait. He went to Michigan. So, wait. No, not Notre Dame. Who is... Hold on. All right. I don't want to waste that air.
I got you. You got Bo Schembechler.
Yep.
Okay, you're talking about him and Woody Hayes.
Yeah, but that's after... Yes.
Could rip a new ass like nobody's business. And that was what coaches were defined as back then. Okay, so now let's go to this. And this is the part I know a lot about.
Wasn't Schembechler the predecessor to Kiffin down at FAU? I think he was the coach right before.
No. You're thinking about the guy from Miami. Oh God, the guy that was before like Dennis Green. Oh, I'm blanking.
I'm getting you off. Go ahead.
Great, but anyway,
I'll
so
look it up while
so
you
he
do it.
goes there, and then he goes to the Bears, and he goes to Ditka, and Ditka was a screamer and a yeller too. A little different personality. I mean, Dick is a personality. Dick is larger than life. Dick is one of the largest in life. Yeah, and so, but the point was, if you watch play, like
Bears.
he used to just chew people's asses. Well, here's the thing: is I remember he used to chew Jim McMahon's ass all the time, and McMahon made fun of him, laughed at him, clowned him in practice, in the media. Because McMahon was his own guy, and he had his own personality, and he didn't care. Harbaugh was actually hurt by that, like in a way, like he didn't respond to that
like
constant ass
he'd go
choosing.
home and cry at night in his big pillow.
And that's why his big years were in Indianapolis, because he got away from the Bears and he went to like a soccer coach.
Right.
So, but here's my whole thing is what's amazing, and a lot of people don't know the history of the Harbaugh family, more particularly the dad. They know the brother, John, because he's a good coach, but his dad was a tough coach. Jim Harbaugh's dad was a very famous high school coach, very, very tough. Now I go back to, remember in the beginning when I said the players today are the characters in the NFL.
Right.
The problem he struggled with in the NFL is his old school mentality started to wear on players when they stopped winning. It's only good when they're winning, but then his players started to reject him. And that's why I think you saw that fall. It doesn't mean he's not a good coach, but it has to do with, and this goes back to your original point with the college guys, you have to be able to identify with the group you're bringing in, and identifying with a kid that came out of a neighborhood that doesn't get paid a lot, doesn't get paid any money, comes out of either, whether it's a tough neighborhood or a good neighborhood, they come out of a certain type of society that now the coach has got to identify with. Harbaugh's mentality is somewhat working and not working. Now his other problem is he walks into a scenario in Michigan where I don't care what anything happens at Michigan, you beat Ohio State. It's just like Auburn, Alabama.
Yeah.
Regardless
you can wash away a lot of pain from a bad season by doing that.
With the exception of winning a national championship, and even I tell you that's debatable with all the Auburn and Alabama fans who win. If you lose that game, you've pissed off your fan base.
Yep.
You've pissed them off. I don't care
You've
what
pissed
you
off
win.
your boosters.
Yes, everybody's ripped. So he walked into that against
Howard
Urban Meyer.
Schnellenberger, by the way.
Schnellenberger,
Howard
thank you.
Schnellenberger.
I can picture him, gray hair and the mustache.
Schembecker, Schnellenberger, tomato.
They're one's a burger, one's a Beckler.
That's right.
So here's the.
I like to buy hamburger.
So this, again, I think what coaching is all about is you do have to be yourself, but you have to buy into the idea that whatever I'm going to be it's got to attract what you need to be successful. But here's where, and you've heard me say this again, best teams, owners own, upper management manages, coaches coach, players play.
That's right.
Anytime they interfere. So I look at a situation like Leach is exactly that. You've got your owners in college, which are your head of your boosters, because they're paying most of your contract. Once they start interfering, right, because you and I have talked about this a lot. There's things you're great at. If I bring you into my business and then I say, okay, you're great at all these things, but now I want you to do all these other things differently and do them my way. What's your success level? It's impossible. And I think, and then
what's your attitude before the success even comes?
Right. And then so you start butting heads. And once you butt heads, that is a complete disease in your organization. And I think
when your attitude is to start thinking about this headbutting that you've got to address rather than doing your job.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And then now here's the thing is your coaches are seeing this. Whether you think it's kind of like two parents getting divorced and they pretend that just because my kids are kids, they don't know what's going on. I've got that in my family. My brother told me that, and I was like, you don't understand. Your kids see 100 times more than you think they see. It's the same thing with your assistant coaches. They might not be in the meetings where you're meeting with them and you're arguing with them, but they see the aftermath of you coming out of there, like you said, your attitude. They see the way you change where it's like, hey, coach, your idea was always this. Yeah, and then all of a sudden now, wait, you're telling me to turn this way? And you used to be like this. Like, what happened? And you don't seem to believe in it.
Well, I mean,
all that
that's
is
one
infectious.
Of the things, I think with all the, publicity and media that Clemson's got as a school, enough people hopefully know. But, I mean, Dabo's story is, believe it or not, his mother lived in his dorm room, when he walked on to Alabama. His mother, they didn't have a home. So in terms of that kind of life adversity, which a lot of these kids come from, like, very, rough backgrounds, and I'm not just saying walking out, but more walking outside and having to worry about bullets flying out, but more from the sense of your upbringing. I was talking to John the other day about, talking to when you go talk to, like, a psychologist or this, that, and the other, he said, look, like rehab centers, most of the time these people, it's like the first week to 10 days that you're getting unhooked from whatever you're addicted to. The next, like, 3 to 6 months or however long is all about talking with somebody. And most of that...
you have to learn how to live your life again.
And most of that conversation is to find out how you got where you are, and that's from talking about your past. And he's like, everything comes from who you are is all about where you came
your decision making.
So it's more about that. Like, the guy came from, an adverse situation, from family, his parents looking at that situation, kind of like doing it on his own, but not just that. Just like Deshaun Watson, man. The kid's mother, when he was finishing high school, had, cancer of the mouth. She had, and he, she was still around, but she was going through all this, and he had his aunt and uncle nearby to help. But, he said he basically had to help raise his younger siblings,
I think, too, like...
there's a relation there from life experience that it can't come off contrived when you speak to, like, a recruit or something, or when you're speaking to him as a player, like they just can feel it.
But they've got, and that's kind of the thing. Like, you've got to, when you bring anybody into your team of any sort, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's your circle of friends, whatever it's going to be that's going to influence your life, you are bringing somebody in that is a 360-degree person. You're not bringing in a piece of anybody whenever you do it. When you go to work and you're there to have a good day and you're having problems at home, every human being is going to have that leak into their life.
Absolutely.
And you have to understand.
We know it. We've seen it personally.
Right. So I look at it, and I use Dabo. You and I talked a bit about this, and I can always go back to the difference between Taggart and Dabo as two, because those are two that you and I know very well. But look at Dabo. And I want to run a little bit of an outsider's timeline, and you can fill in all the detail with this. But here is a guy that walked into a program. We talked about this before. We walked into a program where Dabo was no high-level guy coming in. He was not the hottest name in college football. Like, wasn't like Harbaugh's free, who's going to get him kind of guy, all right? So
Scott Frost a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so
Tom Herman.
So Clemson brought him in because he had a history with them, right? He was their wide receivers coach before he took over, right? Wasn't that what his position was? He was already in the program.
Yes, but he was a wide receivers coach under Tommy Bowden, and they dismissed Tommy during the season and named him the interim head coach per Tommy Bowden's recommendation. He's like, right. I think this is the guy that should run.
Right. So here's the thing is,
and then after that year, earned the job because he did a good job.
And you look at it, just take Tommy Bowden and him as an example. Tommy Bowden, regardless of his coaching past, because it's not like, but he had the worst last name for him, because not only that, he was in the conference with the legend. So the scenarios are always different.
By the way, classic. I don't give a damn if you guys whoop this every year. That helped. And this is where Tommy, I still do. I mean, like, I was there when
the coaching matchup, as you said, sold it.
Dude. And it was great for our program.
It was
our
the right
program.
Step.
Part of the reason we became who we were, that Bowden Bowl thing became nationally recognized, and where we started our massive recruiting, and Dabo will attribute just about all of it, was C.J. Spiller. When we pulled, because we started a pipeline out of Florida that then led to Sammy Watkins, and it was when he says it, when we recruited CJ out of Florida, you don't think like some of those Bowden Bowls, between the state of Florida and the state of South Carolina started to open those recruit sites? Hell yeah.
Well, that goes back to your original point, but sticking with Dabo on this, he goes and he takes over a program that was a middling program at that point, just from a wins perspective. They picked a guy who they didn't have to go give a ton of money to, and Clemson said, look, we're going to stick with our guy. He obviously, as a personality, and this is something nobody knew. Maybe the Clemson, faithful did, but nobody outside of the game knew that who this guy was. Like, he was going to have to reveal himself.
That, especially when Dabo got named, at that time more than ever, because we were just graduating.
Well, everybody said, "Who's this Dabo Swinney
guy?" We loved our Clemson Tigers. We weren't like they were telling you, yeah,
you weren't enamored, right? And so, but Clemson made a point to say, okay. He came in, and what I guess my point is, the pressure for him to succeed at the level he's succeeding at right now did not exist like it now it would, but he's earned it. But the point is, so he comes in, and they say he has an idea. This is how I want to run this program, and he gave that information to the team, and they said that's a vision we can go with. Okay, so now let's go to that. Here is your spearhead. The money, your boosters, are in line with their coach. They didn't go after the big name. They didn't try to make a huge splash because they tried that, and it didn't end up with the end result they wanted, which was national title and competing, or competing nationally, competing with Florida State every year. There was some competition, but it never took the next step. So
you got my mind racing. I don't want to take you down rabbit holes, but I got so much to say.
Right. That's why I said you'll fill in the detail. So he does that, and he gets this room to create something, and it's not like he walked out of the box and went 11-1. He didn't.
No,
he did well, but he
did the big thing no.
And he changed the mindset. He said, "Well, wait a minute. Why can't we start recruiting a deeper geography?" Back to your point about the Florida.
He changed the mindset in the sense of the facilities.
He and let me just say this: he loves the university he's at, which goes back to. The people that hired him are putting him in a position to succeed and allowing him to be him. You said the difference between him and I think the similarities to him and Saban are real simple. They're real simple. Expectation. Beyond that, I don't think they're alike at all. I don't think they're alike.
Well,
I don't think their approach.
If you want to, look, everybody uses it all the time nowadays, and I think I talked to Matt one time about. Maybe doing a little recon on it. But the whole all-in thing, dude, that was his thing. When Dabo got the job at the end of the interim season and they named him head coach, he said, I need him to be all in. That was not a saying that was all out, that was out and used very much. That was the first time we could use. And now it's and that's a similarity. So if that you want to tie expectation to that, like Saban has said, just like Dabo, everybody that's a part of this has to buy in. Okay, everybody. That's why it's run like a business. Like the recruits are interviewing to get a job, and if they get a job, then the expectation that he has is they're already on board with what he's got to do. Now there's another expectation. The pressure, because at Alabama, you better play to a high level because that's what we expect. You play Alabama football, which is the best.
Yep.
No room for error. And why? Because they set that expectation, because they've got about 4 and 5 stars sitting behind you. So if the minute you screw up, you could be your job. I mean,
well, and
at Clemson, everybody gets playing.
Well, let me give you this for statistics, kind of show what I'm saying. I think 2008, because his record looks incomplete, it would be the year he took over.
Yes, 2007 was the year he made that. Was at the end of that season he made that speech.
So let me give you this: if he's the hottest name in coaching, if he was coming out into Clemson, what would his career look like with his first 3 seasons being 4-3, 9-5, and 6-7? Tell me, is Jim Harbaugh surviving that? Would Jimbo Fisher survive that at Texas A&M? Maybe only because he bled again. 4-3, which is a partial season.
Yeah.
9-5, 6-7. That's 2008, 2009, 2010. Now let me show you this. So then let's take the next 4 years in another chunk: 10-4, 11-2, 11-2. And 10-3.
Mm-hmm. It was the 11-12 season, which were we 11-2. That was the season.
That was 2012. Yeah, you finished. You were tied for first in the Atlantic, and you won the Chick-fil-A Bowl, which I think
against LSU, and I was there. 4th and 16. Make a play. Taj Boyd, DeAndre Hopkins. All the way down the field from there, kicked a field goal with no time left, looked in John Cristodoro's face. I was in the hospital 2 days before from food poisoning, but you bet your damn dollar I was going to be at that game. And I looked at that boy's face and just laughed. After he said, he chuckled when, who's the real Death Valley? Who are the real Tigers?
All right.
How about you now, son?
All right, so Clemson fans, climb down off the ceiling. But then, so let me say this. So then, now let's take the last 4 seasons, the most 4 recent seasons: 14-1, 14-1, 12-2, 15-0. Okay, so you're talking about a guy that's got 11 years in this program, and I look at it and go, so now I go back to my whole point about why nothing exists in a vacuum. Let's think about circumstances. Now I'm going to tell you let's do this. Dabo, we know this isn't going to happen because Clemson was smart enough to put this in his contract.
Yes.
Dabo being an Alabama fan. Nick Saban leaves, top of the world. Okay. Dabo Swinney comes. Dabo's
there,
hold
bro?
on. Just now tell me this because I want an honest. I want an answer.
Holes.
I want an answer. Dabo goes to Alabama. Alabama goes. Well, we'll X this out. We'll say that they go 7-4, 9-5, and 6-7 in his first 3 seasons in Alabama. Is Dabo coaching in year 4?
Yes.
In Alabama?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
I disagree.
Absolutely not. Following a legend? Absolutely not. Because it will have mean that you have taken the shine off the apple at a program.
It will, but if he's changing. Because where those differences between coach and Saban are, might also be the difference in having to go through a whole system of guys. So I'm not saying 5, but you're talking about going into year 4.
But again, I go back to he's coaching a team now in that scenario that was not broken. It's not broken. And I think you're looking at it through some rose-colored glasses in a sense because realistically, 1, he wouldn't take over an Alabama program. 2, if he took it over with that kind of talent, they would succeed because he would have credibility and he would know how to coach them. He may change the roster and maybe not go 14-0. He might have a couple of losses, but there's no way he's having a sub-500 season. So let me think about this. Think about it this way.
He's not going to Alabama.
He's not. But my point is the scenario in which a coach steps in is incredibly important. And you're telling me those boosters would say, wait a minute, Nick Saban's got a fistful of championship rings. We don't lose the SEC West. And now all of a sudden this coach comes in and goes 6-7 in year 3.
You're not talking about Nick Saban going elsewhere, going to the NFL or them firing.
No.
You're talking about him retiring. So it's not like they have an option for Saban. So it's, like that could happen to any coach going to Alabama.
No, right. Exactly. You're proving my point.
My point, if you bought in Dabo over any of those other coaches, okay, that could happen to. I think between him and the rest of the pool, they would give him that extra year.
Okay,
the rest of the pool maybe makes your point.
Okay, well,
Dabo maybe gets the extra year. Especially if it would be in recent times.
I think going backwards would never happen if you were under 500. But here's the other piece is, so now let's take another scenario.
So then what? You become Tennessee?
No, let's take another scenario.
Tennessee still hasn't recovered since Fulmer's, but they let Fulmer
but how did Alabama recover after it took 2 decades for Alabama to recover after Stallings left? You know what I mean? So, but here's my point is this. Let's take that same record and let's paste it on Jimbo Fisher right now at Texas A&M. If in 3 years Jimbo Fisher's sub 500 at Texas A&M at $75 million, now let's just put aside the guaranteed contract because we don't know what they could buy out of. But the point is there would be no joy in Mudville if that happened. And so my thing is, I'm going back to is, if you want to build a good program, part of being successful in this is having a leadership that is going to buy into what you're doing and allow you to do it. They always say, don't ever, ever, ever follow a legend. Now, I look at Jimbo Fisher as an example at Florida State. Jimbo Fisher's leg up in there was, Fisher was already on the staff. The coaching waiting was clunky and clumsy and not really a good look. But the truth of the matter is he got to start putting pieces together and
putting his stamp on the program.
And
before he was
the team was
officially
7-6 when Bobby Bowden, they had won their bowl game. I think it was West Virginia. They beat West Virginia when Bowden planted the spear, and Bowden wanted another year, and they canned him. And they granted he was on a year-to-year contract for probably the last 15 years of his career. He never signed more than a 1-year deal because the idea was, when do you want to stop coaching? And so here's my point is, going back and you asked then, now let's take a polar opposite, which is a guy like Taggart, and you were asking me about it. And as a Florida State fan, I was livid watching what I watched last year. Like, just watching was disgusting. But I was a guy that I was not like fire Taggart, but I'm definitely a guy that is, I'm not sure Taggart's the right guy, but
yeah, but are you not sure? Because, like, here's why I wouldn't think he is, and it really kind of reinforced it. The first thing that kind of told me that, too, was, I said it before, like, when you guys weren't doing great last year, like, there's not a lot of character. Now, some coaches, I don't expect all coaches to be Brent Venables or Dabo Swinney, but, like, his body language showed me nothing. If anything, it showed me, like, he was going down with the ship, too. He wasn't trying to keep it afloat.
Right.
The other thing, what reaffirmed that again, I watched the ACC Media Days, and on there even, he's just not like, I mean, maybe there is something to the fact that Dabo is somewhat of a character, because in front of those kids, like, it's like, whoa. You know, I mean, like, I'm not saying, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I mean, Taggart's very, like,
okay, well,
I mean, even David Shaw has a little character about him.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this. Let me
So
respond.
Before
to
you
that.
jump in, what I was going to ask is because it's kind of feeding off what you're saying is, okay, we talked about it last season, all right? Okay, so if relating it to Dabo, if say Taggart was an interim coach, just like Dabo's for however it's his first season, you know. He had a bad season. Dabo's interim time was on the plus side, and things looked good. Okay,
right.
So, but even if it wasn't good, they might have let him have the next year because he just got started. So, I guess it leads me to this: what if it's you're upset to your stomach this season watching it?
Okay. Yeah, well, because like anything else,
hopefully that feeds a little bit back to your.
It does. The proof is in the pudding. But here's what happens: is you saw those things, and I'm going to tell you when I wanted Jimbo Fisher gone. I can tell you one very specific moment. Okay, I was watching the Florida State game his last year. Now, understand, we had to reschedule a game with. It was Southern Miss, I think, as we played in the bowl game, some scrub team at the end of the year just to get bowl eligible. So we played Florida, and we beat Florida, okay? Matthew Thomas, I intercepted the ball on the, 15-yard line at the end of the game. Went to go run it in, started doing this flashy kind of thing. Now, understand, Matthew Thomas was a guy who was a 5-star linebacker, came to Florida State, and totally underperformed compared to his rankings, was constantly, he tried to go back and quit and go back to USC on his first year. He just didn't want to be there. And then he came back, and then he was hurt, and then he didn't have the right attitude. So he's running the ball back. It's his last game as a senior, and he tries to be all cocky and starts swinging his arms, and he drops the ball on the half-yard line. Of course, they instant replay it.
I remember this.
Yes.
Now.
Instant replay.
I remember that. What year was this?
This was Fisher's last year in 2017.
Yeah.
So
I remember this.
But ball gets recovered by Florida, or it went out of the end zone. It was one of the two. And what do? They review it, see that he dropped the ball. The best part about it is because Florida State was winning the game at that point, Matthew Thomas is on the sidelines laughing. Okay? We weren't even bowl eligible at this point, and he's laughing. And I said, he's lost this friggin' team. Nobody respects him. Well, the problem is, now see, this is kind of how you got to let things play out. Now, let's go back to this year. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blame everything on Fisher. But understand, that was the mentality. That's a red shirt senior doing that. That's your leadership core. That's your starting middle linebacker, red shirt senior. So he goes and does that.
And Fisher leaves. Now, this is the other thing is, Fisher wasn't fired after the season. They brought Taggart in because he quit on us and didn't go to the bowl game. Taggart had an opportunity through the whole month of December to go and recover a class. Now, let me give you a name on this class. Justin Fields was Florida State's to lose for the better part of a year and a half. Jimbo Fisher stopped making contact with him. Fields came out and told him that. Came out on and admitted that. It was a kind of an off to the side thing, but it was admitted that he stopped recruiting. And so now I look at that team, and that's a team that Fisher had to start because of he really after Winston, he lost his quarterbacks. He had to start James Blackman, a 6'4", 116-pound freshman, who and that happened. So,
to be honest with you, watching our games against you, especially when you had Francois,
look at him.
He got the crap kicked out of him, and then Blackman came in against us, or we had to play. I was like, oh my God, this kid's gonna get crushed.
He's tough. He
actually was tougher than Francois.
But he is. But do you think about this? Francois can't even get on a team now. Alabama State dropped him. FAU is dropping him. He has no team as of right now. And here is a guy that started against as a redshirt freshman against Ole Miss in a big Monday night, or it was Saturday night or Monday night. It was the biggest game to start the season because Florida State was supposed to be good again. And my whole point is this: is he had to go do this recruiting process, and he got tagged, no pun intended, for that recruiting class. When really the reality is he was just salvaging it. Everybody went like, wow, he can't recruit. And this is a guy with a history of recruiting well at weaker universities. And so I look at that and I see how that starts. And then he goes down and he plays. Now we find out about why, because I was like, why doesn't he just play freshmen and just start tossing these older guys off the team that are clearly problems?
Okay, when we're done talking Florida State, I want to dwell on.
Well, we can go back, but this is going back to Dabo. So this happens. Now we find out at the end of the season, Florida State was it the lowest or the second lowest APR in the country? He couldn't get rid of guys. Couldn't get rid of guys because if he did, they would have gotten
dum-dums.
Yeah, but they would have gotten he had to keep certain players with bad attitudes because their grades were helping us keep with the APR. If we would have lost, if we would have gone, we were at like a .933. If we would have gone below a .930, I think, if I might have the numbers a little bit off, but it's something like that, we would have actually been hit with penalties and had less practice time, all this. So I look at it and go, think about it. Dabo gets 3 years of barely over 500 football with a university that is backing him till no end. Taggart walks into the biggest dumpster fire of a high-profile program that is only, think about this. 2014, we were undefeated going into the college football playoff. In 2017, we're 7-6. And we had to schedule a makeup game for a hurricane just to get bowl eligible. Brother. So I'm talking about, so here's my whole point is painting scenarios, and we can step off of Taggart because I'm not going to apologize for him because there were deficiencies, and his biggest thing was he was going there to run the offense, and he found out the team was in such disarray, he had to put his offensive coordinator in as actually the play caller because he had to deal with all the other team issues. So here's my thing is that to me has bought him an opportunity, but I will tell you, if I'm staring at this record in 2 more years, I don't even know if he gets to do that for 2 years. I think this is his year. He has to show marked, we have to be bowl eligible. I got to be honest with you. I think anything less than 8 wins, and this is a guy that had 0 offense. Our offensive lineman shouldn't have been a high school offensive line.
Oh, God.
That was the whole game.
This is, again, other conversations.
But anyway,
what was the center's
name?
So the
whole center of this,
so that guy was a revolving, was a swing, not a revolving,
Eberle.
He was a swinging. Oh, my God.
Hey, can I tell you something?
My gosh.
My 5th-year senior.
I know.
5th-year senior.
Stupid. Oh, this year?
No, he was a 5th-year senior that year.
I was about to say, he's back?
No.
Yes!
No, but here's my point.
Our freshmen are going to run rampant on him.
They had to go JUCO. He's had to do so much fixing.
How that guy was playing D1 football and at Florida State, no less.
Okay, so he was a recruit of Fisher that played for years. And here's the thing is, so my point is, does he deserve, if he got the same opportunity as Dabo, But the reality is, his scenario, he'd never get that opportunity.
And
never.
And I'll wrap that on this. I mean, it's amazing how, business and life, and though there are a lot of different facets to football in general, and deeper in college football because of the red tape that you have to kind of weave your way through. There's so many similarities, buddy. Right place, right time.
Yeah, exactly. And so now let's go back to your original guy, the guy you love, Mike Leach. How does Mike Leach do at Clemson, given a Dabo scenario? Assuming they like him, and it's not. So my point is, what if somebody actually supported that guy? So it goes back to right place, right time. And what I get kind of tired of is, they talk about Tom Herman at Texas,
Florida
all
State,
that. They're all
Florida
different.
State is okay. Think about it like this too. If this were the last year and we were able to get our hands on Mike Leach to come in, and he had the record you just said coming off of Dabo, I think he'd be fine.
Wait, say that again.
If Dabo retired at the end of this season, we're hypothetically speaking, or left, and all of a sudden we were able to bring Mike Leach in, and Mike Leach had the 4-3, the 6-7, the 9-5, whatever you just said Dabo had, right?
Yeah.
Type records. What would happen to him? I think he'd be all right. And here's my
Wait, you think he'd be all right if he walked in after Dabo this year and went with Dabo's first 3 years?
Yes. And
Absolutely not.
Here's my rationale. How long's it been since you won a national title?
13, so 6 years.
And prior to that, Florida State, for the most part, was not just winning, but a dominant program in college football for the better part of how long? Decade,
2 decades. 2 decades.
Okay. 2 decades of masterful success. Okay. If we come out, we've got 2 national championships in 4 years and 5-6 years of success, double-digit win seasons. I'm saying my rationale to your question, again, it's about the situation, the right place at the right time. They pose the question, okay, here we go, Alabama, Clemson 5. Is that what we're going to have this year, everybody? Are people getting bored? Is it the Cavs and the Warriors? Okay. And I always say, well, if you don't like it, beat us. Okay. It's good football. It's the best 2 teams, right? But does the fan base become complacent? You could see it in Alabama fans as a Clemson fan from the first season we've played them in the national title game, tailgating and such, to the last one. Okay.
Right.
And so does that happen to Clemson fans? No, I think it's a little different because they have much longer history of winning. Okay. But if it were to happen next year that Leach came in, okay, we're still coming. I mean, we're riding a high, bro. We're riding a high. It would be disappointing, yes. But we may go with the rationale of let him get 4 years in his system and recruits because we're riding high. You, with Taggart now, are 6 years removed coming off of 2 decades of being successful. If Taggart was the coach after Bobby, I think, and went 3 years with that mediocre 500 schedule, I think they would give him his 4th year.
Okay, but let me throw a scenario at you, and this is where I think I can a little bit burn up your argument.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Because if it's boosters that pay and from a fan base perspective and the brand and everything, you talk about, and that it never lasts. You got to understand it's never going to last forever. It's going to be a roller coaster. So, are you I think Clemson if it were to happen now or at the end of the season, I think we'd take the mindset of let's not cut off our nose to spite our face. Give the guy his time.
Okay.
Well, now, not forever, but 4 to 5 years.
Here's where I think that argument, though, might go to die a little bit. You know how many draft picks you guys had last year? Roughly?
Let's see. Draft picks, right?
Guys
not undrafted free agents.
I can look it up.
6, 7 maybe. Maybe
Okay.
draft picks.
So
6, 7.
Do you have any first rounders?
Yeah, we had 1, 2, 3 in the first round. We had Dexco first. We had 4. Cleveland Furl went first.
You had
No. We had 3. I thought it depends. I can't remember because the Oakland Raiders had so many dang picks in round 1, and they picked throughout their whole draft 3 Clemson guys. I know that they picked Furl early. The Giants picked Dex. The Dolphins picked Christian Wilkins, and then I think one of the late picks from the Raiders was Alexander, Travion Mullen, our cornerback.
Yep. All right. So here's my question to you: do you guys feel like you're going to be a bad team this year since you lost all that talent?
No.
Okay. So my point is, you bring in Mike Leach. The cupboards.
It's reload, not rebuild.
Right. The cupboard's not bare. Now I look at Florida State in the years before the year we won the championship and after we won the championship, 2013, 14, and 15. We put the lowest I think we put was 7 guys in the draft in 2014. We put 11 guys in the draft, I think. I just counted quickly, in 2015. All right. After that, 2016, we put 2 guys in the draft. Jalen Ramsey and a kicker. 2017, we put Dalvin Cook in the second round, DeMarcus Walker in the second round, who, by the way, is probably about to get cut. And then we put a 5th and 6th rounder. Last year, Derwin James, who was a freak of a player, and was
I love Derwin James.
Absolutely unknown. After that, we put a 3rd rounder and then 4th and 7th rounders in, and we had. So my point now is, I look at Florida State's team right now and I go, who's going in the draft next year and who's going to be highly sought after in the draft? And the truth of the matter is, maybe their running back Cam Akers, if he has a really good year, could be a 3rd rounder. I'm speculating.
Yeah.
But my point is,
he walked in the cover. We're really starting to we're just taking sides.
Right, but
I also said early in the conversation, we live in an instant gratification kind of world. I understand your point of view,
but the point is, the cupboard's not bare, so if Mike Leach,
but his trajectory is going in the wrong direction.
Nobody would expect anybody to perform less than 10 wins with Clemson if they're a decent coach this year. So if you didn't and you went with that record I just gave you, it's not the same. And that's why I go back to what are you trying to build? And if you truly are trying to build something epic, and, Bobby Bowden was a gift. Fisher was a very good coach and Florida State presented a lot of opportunities to him. Florida State for the money and all the other issues.
Went in round 2, by the way, 40th overall.
Right.
So we had 3 in round 1.
Right. So my point is, your cupboard's not bare. Like right now, Florida State loses 8 guys or 7 guys. And you're dealing with the fact that they've lost 7 guys, and I look at it and go, they don't have replacements. There's no Derwin James. Derek Noddy's the next one. We got actually, I checked that. There is one guy that's going to go in the first round, and that's Marvin Wilson. But the point is, we don't have this elite level. We didn't reload like we normally do, and that matters. I have to look at our roster and be honest. We haven't recruited a quarterback in 2 years. 2 cycles went by with no quarterback. So, and right now, this is our quarterback situation. And to expect a guy to do well is he's got to go with James Blackman, who is not elite. And they pulled a graduate transfer, Hornerbrook, from Wisconsin, who plays no sort of offense that we're about to play. They had a guy they transferred from Louisville who they still will not give a waiver on. They won't even make a decision on it, and we're already into fall ball. And that's it. And a walk-on. So if Blackman goes down, we're in a world of hurt. So I got to look at Taggart and go, is
bad preparation, buddy.
But what do you do? That not missing a quarterback the second year, and think about, let's go back to the quarterbacks that Fisher
Who's the quarterback coach? Who's your recruiter? Who's the guy that does who's your top recruiter on the staff? It can't be Taggart. He just got there. Who's the guy that's been doing it for you guys? Who's the guy that gets all these players?
It's Taggart. They just got a guy that played while I was there. Ron Dugans
it's
out of
not
Miami.
Dabo for us. It's not Venables.
No,
it's Brandon Streeter.
But the point is, I just said we put our.
It's not even Brandon Streeter. Who is it? It's I don't know. Go ahead.
We put our staff together. Coach. We put our staff together in December of last year, which is the worst time to put your staff together. They couldn't wait because of the recruiting problem. They couldn't wait until the end of the season to see who left. He had to go and pick up all these guys. So my thing is, I'm not making, again, this sounds a little bit like an apology tour. That's why I kind of want to stop it. The point is, these scenarios are so different for every coach.
And the truth comes down to, are they going to support him? And when the university comes out and says, I think he's definitely going to get a third year, I think that's the right thing to do because our team is a disaster. And he didn't get a team that is typical Florida State. And even Fisher had better recruits coming in. And we went 7-6 when Bowden was done. So it's not like we blew the doors off anything. He did have to rebuild, and it's not like we went 11-2 the next year. He had to rebuild, and he did, but I've also never seen the chaos. So I look at it and go, I look at the whole coaching thing and go, your top level has to make good decisions and then get out of the way. And Mike Leach didn't happen. Okay? Harbaugh.
Well, and that's where I was, I was going to wrap this thing, bringing it back, because you were talking about, Taggart and playing freshmen and, like, what do you do and this, that, and the other. So I'm going to wrap it back because I think it'd be rather fun to end this coaching conversation. Do you want to make your point before I do that?
I mean, that just is my point, is that it's, you can show such distinct differences and go, like, what the hell would you do?
Correct. So what would you do? Like, in my mind, here's the thing. So we talked about it with Harbaugh, kind of started this conversation out with it. Like, I said that I think I think his window's closed. I think the way that they're going to
window's closed?
Harbaugh. I think his opportunity to make some big things happen and maybe then have it continue to go consistently like we have at Clemson, was those first 2-3 years maybe. I think he's been there 4 to 5 years, right? And I think at this point in time, he certainly, you said it too, you can make a lot of things, bad seasons and things go away if you beat your rival. They've had good seasons and bad and have had their opportunities and haven't even been able to do that. Shit, they're coming off of a great season with a phenomenal defense, at least statistically last year, and they got embarrassed by what was looking to be a subpar Ohio State team, quite frankly. Okay, so I think his window's closed. So, I mean, let's end on that. I want to get your thoughts. But you said in terms of decision-making, like, I look at a guy like Harbaugh, like, why didn't he play Dylan McCaffrey at quarterback when he was a freshman? Why didn't he play him last year? Like, he's going to compete for the job this year, and that seems to be kind of something we maybe need to look at. I mean, quarterbacks at Michigan, like, when's the last time, like, a young quarterback was at the helm at Michigan? It usually is the grad transfer or the guy that's going to get and wait a minute. We may not even been talking just about Michigan. Now that I start to think about it, the whole conference is like that. I mean, Dwayne Haskins played 1 year, okay? These guys sit behind, kind of like in the NFL, or ideally should be in the NFL. That's changing too. They sit behind and wait their time, get their shot, go for a year, maybe 2, but they're at the time they get the helm, they're not like starry-eyed. They've been around it, have gotten some starts. They're in terms of school-wise more than likely older, And so, like, buck this. I mean, Harbaugh is he's goofy and stuff. Like, you got 5-star Dylan McCaffrey came in. I think he's going to be a junior school-wise this year. I believe. I think last year he was a sophomore. Like, I haven't seen the kid go, and he was like one of the top recruits in the country. Like, why not? Throw him out there. You ain't doing any better. The defense is what I said was really good statistically. The offense, every season under Harbaugh, and he's a quarterback, guys, then, Now, maybe he sees something we don't, obviously. He's a coach. He was a quarterback, but he was a quarterback. Like, talk to the guy. The kid's a McCaffrey, okay? He's an athlete. You said it before. How do you find the guy's best attributes and make him flourish? Like, do that.
Yeah, but here's again, it goes to reality. Number one, we don't know what Harbaugh did to sell himself in this job. Does Harbaugh say I can make a quick fix? So now you're talking about this is his last shot. Let me just give you this. He's gone 10-3, 10-3, 8-5, and 10-3. That's not that based off the records you're talking about is not horrible.
Okay.
But the point is,
how many of those have earned them a college football playoff berth?
No. I'm not
How
disagreeing
many of
with you.
those winning seasons then, if they didn't get to the postseason, which could be a win, did they at least beat their rival?
Okay, but when was Michigan?
I mean, there's nothing to say for it. You said it yourself. There are those teams that out there, especially the bigger powers, the blue blood programs that have rivals matchups, that it can be as important, if not in some cases more important, than the postseason accolades.
Right, but and that's kind of exactly you're proving where I was going with this in a sense, because I go back to it's all about scenario. What Michigan bought with Harbaugh, because they paid him out the nose, is I need a quick fix. So you asked about the quarterback. I will tell you, they went 8-5, and they went quarterback's the problem. They had problems with quarterback. And so what did they do? They went and got the number 1 overall recruit when he came out of high school, Shea Patterson, out of that whole mess at Ole Miss. And he said, I got to have an answer right away. I got to have an answer. And this guy's, he's the guy I can go get. He didn't obviously believe in an answer on the roster, or else he wouldn't have been 8-5 in 2017. And so he went out and got it. The thing is, when you make that sort of claim, which while I'm reading between the lines to get that he's making that claim, you've got to deliver on it. And the whole point is 10-3. I'd kill for a 10-3 last year, but at $7.5, $8 million or whatever he's making, he didn't deliver on that last year. Because at the very least, he didn't beat Ohio State. And so you have to, when you look at what you're trying to do with your program, you got to look at what you want. And what I think Harbaugh was, which is what most the hot star quarterback or coaches year in, year out that come out, you know, when Tom Herman was the man at Houston, what has to happen is we expect turnaround with quick results. What he's done is produced same, lower, back up to where I was before. And the same result is we lose to Ohio State, we lose to Ohio State, we lose to Ohio State, we lose to Ohio State. And so therefore, that's what he needed to sell and needed to accomplish there. Dabo Swinney didn't need to beat Florida State every year when he came in. That was not part of his referendum or what he was required to do. And in turn, he built that program. Now, I'm not saying the Dabo's model is great, because here could be the whole thing. You could have gone and picked up a guy like, I'll pick a pro coach, you could have gone and got a Ray Hanley. And if you would have stuck with him for 3 years, you would at the Ray Hanley at college, you could have had a dumpster fire. The only guy that ever made Ray Hanley look smart was Rich Kotite. They were in the same division.
I mean, like,
those are two of the worst coaches I've ever seen.
We're not even talking about a supporting cast role as a head coach there. That guy's not even a friggin' extra. I mean, like, it was
exactly.
it was, that's what I remember of his time with the Giants, is like it was like a nonpartisan system there.
Who's the guy they canned after Coughlin?
Non-existent head to the body.
Who's the guy they just canned? Before they brought in
Shermer?
Yeah, before Shermer.
It was
with the slick back hair and the mustache.
Oh God! See, non-memorable. That's how quickly I wanted to forget the guy. He was our offensive coordinator. It was
his greatest gift was that Ray Hanley coach for the Giants, for him not being the worst coach in history. I remember listening to Boomer and all them and all the guys in New York when I was living up in Jersey talk about that dude.
Oh,
they were like, if not for Ray Hanley, he'd be the worst coach ever.
Yeah,
and
Ben
that's my
McAdoo.
point.
Ben
McAdoo. Yeah. So my point is, like, all that stuff matters. And I still, where I see it is when you see
I look at this. We
interference.
had some damn good head coaches, buddy.
You did. And you went back to players and coaches and about hard asses.
I mean, Allie Sherman in the 60s.
Look at
Ray
Parcells.
Perkins in the late 70s, 80s. Bill Parcells forever and a day, the best. 1 year, Ray Hanley, Dan Reeves, Jim Fossil, Tom Coughlin.
Yeah. I mean, well, you won some Super Bowls in there, but that goes back to the top. Everything filters down. Any organization, the top has to decide what it wants to be and what it's willing to commit to. And seldom do I find and when it comes to head coaches in college in particular, just like athletes in the pros are kind of play that same role, is they're constantly, the teams that are constantly reinventing themselves are constantly sucking wind.
Correct.
Constantly.
They can't find an answer.
And I mean, it's like the Giants. I have a question with the Giants right now.
It could have happened to us too. Like whatever plan Dabo wanted to execute could have failed, and then we'd be back to square one. The difference is it wasn't an X's and O's plan. It never was.
It was a character and a personnel plan.
It was an image of who we are, not as the paw and how everyone sees us, but who we are as a program, what we want people to know about us, not what they see, what we want them to know, what we put out there, what we and they're here again. This is another similarity to Dabo and Saban, what we can control.
Right, but here's what they did do, which is true of any sales pitch. They delivered on what
Correct.
they sold.
Well,
and that's what makes a coach great.
Listen, and you might be able to sing to this a little bit, but from my take, the Bowdens are good old family, man. They're the type of family that has a lot of family values, morals, faith, religion.
Yep.
And who's to say that if Tommy recommended Dabo as the head coach when they were letting him go for the interim spot, that part of that wasn't to do with that the administration and that the boosters from that matter, who in South Carolina were probably faith-based, religious, good old folks that love those type of values, and maybe the other coaches weren't as, shared it as much that the boosters saw in Tommy, because that was a good thing. And that's probably, maybe he's like, this is the guy that, he's going to get along with those folks, and they're going to like him. So at least for an interim basis, you're not going to have to worry about them, in an uproar.
Yeah, and it's also, you look at it and go, who are the players going to follow in this transition? But the reality is I think you would agree, but you can comment to this, is there was no idea that you guys were going to get to the level that you got to at the point when they hired him. So there is.
Oh, no.
But
there was hope because
sure.
The reason we bought Tommy Bowden was to change it. Now, he did. I mean, I give all the credit in the world. I went to school when we had Tommy West, and a 500 season was good for us. Okay? Yeah. Back in the early 90s, mid-late 90s. And when we heard that we were getting a Bowden after getting the crap kicked out of us by his dad constantly, and looking with what his brother did
with Auburn,
over at Auburn, dude, we were stoked. And you know what? He did it. Because we were consistently 8-5, 9-4. What happened was we did that we ended up going from like the late 90s into, the 2007, we went about a decade where he changed it, but then we stayed there. We could never, and it became looked at as mediocrity, and now, especially in this day and age, it is kind of mediocre. It's better than average, but we never hit double digits, and when you get double digits, that's when you're starting to talk good, great, or great elite type
You needed to beat, and part of it, in all honesty, was Florida State was a problem during some of those years too, was you needed to beat Florida State when Florida State was Florida State.
Correct.
And we didn't do you that service because we weren't Florida State many a year.
No, we were. There were those times. There was a year in there where we won, and there were years in there I remember where we competed.
Yeah, you won, but just we weren't. We weren't the upper echelon. You wanted to knock the king off. You didn't want the king after he had lost his throne. To come in.
No, but you guys, we still won. We won one of those games there. With Tommy. Again, he won about it.
No, that's my point. But I'm saying we weren't.
You guys still won a title in 2012, right?
No, 13.
But
that was after Bowden. That was.
I know, but you guys still you weren't what you are now.
No, but
now you can't say that, and I don't care what you say. It's embarrassing. If anyone ever says Florida State's a laughing stock, that's bullshit, dude. It's just bullshit. It's not a laughing stock.
No, they're laughing stock, but they are in deep trouble. They got to turn it around.
Roller coaster. Life is a roller coaster.
Yep.
You can't have the good with the bad all the time. So it's not a laughing stock. You're just hitting your low. It's the question is what I said before with Taggart. When you're not putting, you said not putting, instead of putting players even with bad season, putting a lot of still having talent. and recruiting talent and putting talent in the NFL because these are good guys, and that's starting to go in the wrong trajectory. That becomes a worry, man. So
it is. It is
good coaching talk. Good all together today, and we'll wrap it here. But then we'll, I like the coaching talk. I think there's so many more things we could talk about in this. I think it ties in great to something that we just came off of, which is Last Chance U.
Yep.
And the coaches in that.
Yep.
How that's. People look, and yes, some of them are disgusting, but you don't know their situations. I'm not advocating the stuff they do, but it's also media, and it's a show, Emmy-nominated show, and people are there to make money too and get eyeballs on it. They're going to exasperate. They're going to magnify the bad
Well,
shit.
and let's be honest,
they're
they're
going
there
to
for a
show
reason.
you,
They're there
edit
for a
through,
reason.
and want to show you the train wreck because that's what people enjoy.
That's what reality is. Reality is.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk more on that, and even how it ties into real college coaching because those guys have value. So, but good talk. Good talk. See you next.